It's the night before Halloween, and the streets of Colorado Springs are crawling with teenagers. There's an air of danger, both real and imagined, lurking around every corner.
There's all kinds of mischievous stuff going on. People will get their yards TP'd. Teenagers will throw eggs at people's houses. You never know what's going to happen.
Mm. 17-year-old James Horton has opted for a low-key evening at home.
I was watching a pretty scary movie on TV and trying to see how late I could stay up. Everybody else in the house was asleep.
He sees this person described as a zombie-type person walking through the yard.
I had friends that we were always playing tricks on each other, and so I thought maybe it was somebody that was just kind of messing around with me. I went over to the door, and I was being real cautious because of the freakiness of the situation.
From the front door, James doesn't see anything unusual.
And I thought, well, that's really odd. And so I, still being the young, dumb teenager, I still went ahead and opened the door.
Oh my God. What happened? Are you okay?
When he turned his head, I noticed there was blood on the back of his neck, head area.
Dad, get out here now! We need help!
Across town, CSPD headquarters is buzzing with activity.
Hey, Lieutenant, get this. We just processed 2 vampires and a werewolf for property destruction.
Shaping up to be a long night.
Tell me about it. My first break all night.
2 or 3 days before Halloween, the activity level jumps dramatically. People drinking and wearing costumes to parties. Everyone is very busy. As a result, so are the police.
Hey, Lieutenant.
It's a common thing in law enforcement that there's always the pranksters around and they take advantage of everything, including Halloween.
Copy that.
Lieutenant, we just got a call of a shooting on the southeast side of town.
So much for that break.
I'm in the simple act of trying to enjoy a cup of coffee, but in my business, it isn't simple.
The house in question sits along an otherwise empty stretch of road.
This is practically in the middle of nowhere.
How you doing, Lieutenant?
Hey, Brian. So what do we got?
We got a young male with multiple gunshot wounds to the head. He's been transported to St. Francis.
And we're able to identify this individual. And he's a 17-year-old high school student by the name of Benny Messina.
Any witnesses? The homeowner and his son. According to 911 operator, son observed a zombie-like figure approaching the house and then collapsed here on the porch.
When I walk up in the front porch of this home, there is blood, which I expected to see. But there's also some drag marks off the porch into an area of a bush in the yard. How'd they get there?
Yeah, about that. There's some inconsistencies in the homeowner's story. He told the officers that the victim came to the porch and collapsed, but the paramedics found him down in the bushes.
Well, kid certainly didn't drag himself. Where's this guy?
This guy leaning over by the patrol car over here.
I'm gonna talk to him.
Obviously, talking with Mr. Horton and getting the explanation of what happened on his front porch is important to us.
Mr. Horton, I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
You know, Lieutenant.
Now, you mind telling me what happened here this evening?
I was in the bedroom when it all started.
I know it was past midnight. My son hollered up and said, "Dad, there's somebody at the door."
James, what's going on here?
I don't know. I would have crashed. He was on the porch.
Get in there and call 911.
According to Mr. Horton, at that point he began inspecting the young man's injuries. and quickly made an alarming discovery.
He has a bullet protruding from his neck.
And that bullet let me know that he had to have immediate attention or he wasn't going to make it.
So why'd you move him?
I'm retired military, and my instincts were telling me we had to act quickly.
I did not want him to die on my watch. And if I could get the situation under control, then he may have a chance to live.
I think for anybody, it'd be just so shocking because you'd wondered who'd shot this person. You know, are they close behind him?
We also moved him behind the bushes to protect ourselves and him just in case the shooter was still around. Come on, help me. We've got to move him. We've got to move him over here. Easy. All right, I'm gonna grab his shoulders. You're gonna grab his feet, all right? Lift.
And he says, drag him off the porch and put him in those bushes in case whoever did this comes back.
Ready? Down.
The idea being to protect that victim and protect his domicile from any further attack.
James, get out. Oh, go.
It's completely logical, his explanation for what he did.
No, I appreciate your help.
No problem.
Now that detectives know why Benny Messina was moved, they return to a more basic question.
Where did he come from?
Lieutenant, there's a distinct blood trail right over here.
Grab your flashlights. Let's see where it takes us.
We're able to identify a blood trail leading up to the front door. Backtracking that, we hope to be able to identify an exact crime scene.
The blood trail continues for approximately 30 yards before it abruptly stops near the road.
Did he even shot here?
Well, it's hard to say. Something happened here, though.
You're looking for exactly why this location. Is this the perfect spot for a body dump?
We notice near the blood trail where it ends, there is evidence of a car losing control. I believe there was a car involved that is long gone. Undoubtedly the suspect vehicle. The most likely scenario is our suspect or suspects shot this kid somewhere else, brought him here just to dump him. Except obviously he's not dead. Our victim stands up and starts walking toward the nearest light he sees, which is the Horton house.
Kenda may not know where Benny Messina was shot or why, but he now has a possible means of tracking down the shooter.
Let's collect some dirt samples for evidence. And can you get some castings of the tire tracks?
Tire casts are almost better than fingerprints. The system maintains records on every tire made and sold in North America, so we can identify those tires from the tread line.
As CSIs collect the tire casts, Kenda heads to St. Francis Hospital, hoping Benny Messina has survived and could perhaps shed light on the identity of the shooter.
Excuse me, I'm here to talk to Benny Messina.
I'm sorry, he's in no condition to see anybody.
Benny's in bad shape. He's got 2 gunshot wounds. One apparently is just a graze, but the other one is quite serious.
We're actually prepping him for surgery right now.
According to hospital staff, the bullet entered the back of Benny's head, but miraculously never reached his brain.
It would have killed him without question had it penetrated the bone. However, it ricocheted. The bullet missed everything that was vital. If you placed odds on this, it's a 1 in a million.
In the hallway, Kenda encounters Benny Messina's father, who has just received word that his son has been shot.
Mr. Messina?
Yes, sir.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda. I'm the one handling your son's case.
Mm-hmm.
You mind if I ask you a few questions?
Of course not.
He's already been told he's going to be fine. That takes a huge emotional edge away from him.
Can you tell me a little bit about Benny?
Yeah, Benny's a good student. I have a lot of friends in school.
Do you have any idea where he went tonight?
Benny's father said the last time he saw Benny was earlier that evening, and it was Benny's intention to go to a Halloween party. But Benny's father did not know where the party was or who was having the party.
But as Kenda speaks with Benny's father,
Lieutenant Kenda.
What is it?
the case takes an unexpected turn.
One of the nurses who's been attending our victim here drops a bombshell.
We have another victim.
What do you mean?
And that really surprised me. How do you know that? I don't like surprises. So we're investigating the shooting of Benny Messina when some nurse announces there's a second victim that we know nothing about.
What do you mean there's another shooting victim?
When we were getting Benny ready to go to sleep for surgery, he was telling us about his friend.
Miss Robert.
She said when they were starting to drift off, he kept asking about his friend Robert.
Wait, Benny, what is it? What's wrong?
We don't have he got shot too.
So now we have an enormous complication that we know nothing about. Who's your friend Robert? And could finding them save their life?
He gave us the location, Circle Drive in Hancock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gunshot wounds are always reported to police immediately. We have heard nothing about a medical call at Hancock and Circle.
Lieutenant Kenda, dispatch.
Dispatch.
It appears we have another shooting victim at Circle and Hancock.
So we send patrol units looking for Robert unknown.
10-4, Kenda.
You're definitely working against time here if they're still alive. They could die just from the fact that nobody got to them in time to save them.
While Benny Messina undergoes surgery, Kenda joins responding officers at the site of the second shooting and quickly realizes they are facing an enormous challenge.
We're surrounded by rural terrain. It's dark as you can't see your hand in front of your face. So how do we find Robert?
Hey, we've searched the immediate area in this intersection. We just can't find anything here.
All right, we need to spread out and do a grid search. We got a lot of ground to cover. We're losing time.
Yes, sir.
You want to be able to get your team together and start a reasonably fast but thorough search of the area.
Copy that.
The police are on high alert. You want to find that person, and you've just got your fingers crossed that it's going to be a happy ending.
The team scans the area, but a lengthy search yields no sign of the alleged victim.
Sir, I've checked here and here.
But then, one member of the search party radios Kenda with a possible lead.
Hold that for me.
Officer Price for Kenda.
Go for Kenda.
I think I found something. I'm on a dirt access road 50 yards up Circle Drive, headed northbound.
10-4, I'll be right there. Can you go ahead and keep searching? Fritz?
An officer notices that there is one barricade that was placed to block access to an area, and that barricade had been moved.
Looks like somebody moved it just enough to get a vehicle through.
Well, check this out.
And there were tire tracks in the dirt.
Lieutenant Kenda, I need all responders report to the access road off Circle Drive. Be aware there is tire tread evidence. Let's try to preserve the evidence, but finding our victims priority one.
Copy that.
Yeah. We've got to start being careful now to make sure we're not becoming evidence eradicators.
Robert! Robert!
So now we have a place to focus.
Robert!
Over here! I can't find a pulse.
We got a man down. Need paramedics up here ASAP.
That gets everybody's attention really fast.
Robert! Robert, can you hear me? Robert, can you hear me?
Hey guys, what's going on?
We bring a medical team in there. I looked at that kid when they loaded him on a gurney. And I'm not a doctor, but I have looked at literally thousands of dead people. He does not appear to be alive. So at that moment, my emotions are revolving around the fact that we're not done yet. We've got now 2 victims. This is getting uglier by the minute.
All right, it's officially a crime scene. Still know where the other victim was shot. It could have been here also. So we need a thorough search of every inch of the site. All right?
Yes, sir. We start looking around this area where the body has been discovered. There ultimately is nothing except a blood stain where he had been laying.
Still, Kenda and the team are hopeful the tire tracks may help answer one vital question.
It was the same car at both of these scenes.
I bet good money these are from the same vehicle.
You thinking Benny and Robert were both shot at this location?
Exactly.
This is Detective Ritz. Can I get a CSI over to the entrance by the sign? We're gonna need some more tire tread casts.
Our case is starting to come together, at least tying these two scenes together.
I'm getting some sense of this in my own head. This is malice aforethought, scheme, and design. The plan is to kill two people. Let's take them to a remote area and shoot them. The elements of first-degree murder.
As the sun rises over Colorado Springs, Kenda checks in on the two victims.
Excuse me. I want to check on the status of Benny Messina.
Benny is out of surgery. They removed the slug, and it is a .22 caliber bullet.
We believe he will make a full recovery. He's still under the effects of the sedation, but he should be able to receive visitors later today.
Benny's out of the picture because of his anesthesia. So now what about Robert?
Unfortunately, Robert's a different story, but he was pronounced dead on arrival.
The deceased is identified as 18-year-old Robert Costello, a high school senior.
Robert was born in Germany but was raised in Colorado Springs. He's a good kid, well-educated kid, does very well in school, and has a part-time job in a bicycle shop.
Do they have a cause of death?
Yes, it was from a single gunshot wound from a .22 caliber. We've notified Robert's family, and his stepmother, Cindy, ID'd the body.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Kenda hopes that a conversation with Robert Costello's family will offer some additional insight.
You are now faced with a mother who knows her son isn't coming home anymore. You have to be extremely careful. You try to understand their circumstances and their pain. But at the same time, you have an obligation to investigate the death of their son.
Mrs. Costello? I'm Lieutenant Kenda. I know it's a difficult time, but I need your help in order to find out what happened to Robert. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
I understand. It's okay.
She's very emotionally distressed, of course. She's trying to hold it together.
Do you know Benny Messina?
Yes, he's good friends with Robert. They both go to Harrison High School. They're always together, but I honestly didn't know what they were up to tonight. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. That's our job to find out. Do you know if Robert had any enemies?
And she becomes even more distressed.
There's been threats made against my entire family. Of course, I was concerned, but I just never think somebody could actually go through with it.
Now that rings a very strong bell. Who could it be making those kinds of threats?
Well, you don't have to.
Somebody who's willing to end Robert's life, probably. We're investigating the shootings of Benny Messina, who has survived the attack, and Robert Costello, who did not survive. Robert's stepmother tells me my entire family has been threatened, and that raises an eyebrow.
My other son, Colin, he's Robert's stepbrother. He's been having some trouble with another boy in his class.
She reports that her son, Colin, tells her that he is threatened directly by a person whose name is Brian Cast, who tells Colin Costello that you and your entire family are dead.
If I had been Robert's stepmom, at that point I would have been terrified.
Well, you don't have to.
Did Brian Cast make good in his threat by shooting Colin's older brother, Robert? And was Benny Messina merely collateral damage? People often say because it's a kid to another kid that it's an idle threat. But a kid will pull a trigger faster than an adult will. So when a kid says to somebody, I'm going to kill you, it'd be in your interest to believe it.
Later that day, Brian Cast's mother brings her son to the station for questioning.
Brian, thanks for coming in. Have a seat.
This better not take all day.
We find him to be standoffish, kind of a smart aleck at times, doesn't really appreciate the seriousness of the nature that we're there for.
We have a report you've been making threats against your classmate, Colin Costello, and his family.
I might have said something. So what? I didn't do anything.
And Mr. Cast, you are here because we are investigating a first-degree murder and an attempt at another one.
It would be in your best interest to pay attention to what I had to say.
Listen, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I'm concerned. You just admitted making threats against the Costellos. And now Colin's brother's dead.
And all of a sudden, the arrogance is gone. The bravado is gone. Now he looks like what he is, a little kid.
I might have said those things, but I was just bluffing. Colin was picking on me, and I just needed something to get him to back off.
Why don't you tell me what instigated the entire thing?
Colin and I both play soccer. A few weeks ago, a bunch of us were having a practice match. Give me! Oh, Jamie!
He goes on to say that he is tripped during a soccer game by Colin. They have words.
What the hell was that for?
Colin's friends come up to Colin's aid and announce they're going to kick this kid's ass. He becomes afraid.
I knew the only way to get him off my back was if I turned the tables on them. You let one finger on me and you'll regret it. You and your whole family are dead.
So he makes that threat to defend himself from what he thinks is a group of people who want to hurt him.
Look, I swear, it was all an act. I don't know anything about the shooting. It's the honest truth. Do you believe me?
Just make yourself comfortable. I'm gonna make a phone call.
So let's talk to Colin and let's confirm that what Brian tells me is in fact the truth, and then we can close the matter. When we speak to Colin about this, he freely admits he never told his mother about tripping the kid at soccer because he'd get yelled at. It's much better to report to your mother that you are a victim.
Well, Brian, your story checks out. You're free to go.
So now we've eliminated our first and only suspect. Brian Cast is out the window.
With Benny Messina still recovering from surgery, Kenda returns to the hospital and tracks down Benny's mother, Martha.
My purpose in discussing things with the mother is obvious. Mothers tend to know everything about their sons.
Can you think of anyone that want to harm them?
Just as she knows a man whose name is Jose Fernandez Sr., who is a male in his 40s, and she's heard Jose Fernandez Sr. threaten Benny over the phone. Now, why is he threatening a 17-year-old?
Kenda learns that Jose's son, Joe Jr., was good friends with Benny and Robert.
And she says that Benny, Robert, and Joe Fernandez had gotten into a little bit of trouble at the high school.
According to Martha, a few months ago, the three friends decided to skip class.
You should just skip the rest of the day.
I agree.
Guys, oh my gosh, check this out.
It's the teacher's car that was left in the parking lot of school with the windows down, and the keys were in it, on the dash.
Dude, no, it's just for a little bit. Nobody's even gonna notice.
They see it, they take it, they go to lunch, they drive around.
It's really thumbing your nose at authority because they didn't steal a car of another student. They stole a teacher's car.
Hell yeah. And they abandon the car, and they return to school and go back to class as if nothing happened. It's a classic joyride.
Except all three young men got caught and were arrested and charged with theft.
This was just stupid teenage boy stuff. Give them a little space, give them an opportunity, and a lot of times they'll use it to its absolute worst advantage.
Benny Messina's offered a deal, and he takes it. He's going to get a summons and complaint and probation. Costello takes the same deal.
Their friend, Joe Jr., chose to fight the charges. However, as part of Benny and Robert's plea deal, they agreed to testify against Joe Jr. His father, Jose Fernandez Sr., was furious.
It goes from a telephone conversation threatening Benny over this testimony business to Mr. Fernandez Sr. showing up at the Messina home.
According to Martha, 2 weeks earlier, an inebriated Jose Sr. came to their house, pounding on the door and threatening her husband, Thomas.
Open the door! Hey, what's going on here? Are you really gonna let your son tell lies in court about Joe?
Listen, buddy, he will testify in court, all the truth.
Your kid's a liar. My Joe didn't do anything. He didn't steal that car with them. And Benny better get that straight if he knows what's good for him.
He was going to protect his kid, whatever's necessary.
Why would a father go to the extreme of threatening people about testifying against his son for a simple auto theft case? I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Intrigued, Kenda sends a couple of officers to the Fernandez home to speak with Jose Sr.
In the meantime, I'll do a little digging on my own into Jose Sr.'s background.
Lieutenant, here's that file he requested. There's not much in it, though.
Okay, thank you.
We were shocked to learn that Fernandez Sr. had never been arrested by anybody for any reason. He was a cabinet maker by trade. It was viewed by his supervisors as an excellent worker, one of the best at the company.
The more we look into this, it's kind of like, is this guy really somebody who went out and killed somebody?
20 minutes later, Kenda gets a call that could answer that question.
334 to Lieutenant Kenda.
Go for Kenda.
Hey, Lieutenant, we're at the Fernandez residence right now, and you're going to want to come see this.
There's a vehicle out there, and it has what appears to be blood staining on it.
10-4, I'll be right there.
High-velocity blood spatter comes from one thing, gunshot. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the car. We're investigating the death of Robert Costello. We have developed a new suspect, Jose Fernandez Sr., whose son was a participant in an auto theft with the two victims. When I sent officers to his house to question him, they observed high-velocity blood spatter on the bumper of the family car.
So what do you got?
We've not talked to the residents yet.
Okay, I got a search warrant. Let's go.
The officers try a normal knock and they get no response. So we then move to the police knock. And it's Jose Fernandez Sr.
He sees our guns and immediately slams the door. That's when the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Is he going to get guns and start shooting it out with us?
Police, open the door, Jose. Let's do this the easy way.
We inform him that we're investigating a homicide, and his family rides sitting in the driveways, leaving with us by warrant.
Jose, open the door slowly, where I can see your hand. Your hand. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. You've got no right.
Actually, we do, Mr. Fernandez. Now stay right here while men search your house.
Dad, what's going on?
And out comes Jose Fernandez Jr.
Never mind, go back to your room.
Actually, Joe, I want you to stay here with us.
So the first question we ask is, do you have a gun in this house?
No.
So you're saying neither of you own a gun, and we're not going to find one in this house?
Absolutely not.
No.
Hey, Lieutenant.
So that's not your gun? Well, since both of you lied to me, both of you are going to go downtown until we sort this out. Go ahead and cuff him.
Turn around.
So I give instructions to remove and preserve the vehicle for evidence gathering. And now I have a lot to discuss with this father and son duo.
Back at the station, Kenda is seated with a much more composed Jose Fernandez Sr.
I have a few theories about what happened to those two kids, but I'd like to hear the truth out of your own mouth.
Sure. I've got nothing to hide.
He has a very simple story. He was home asleep and knows nothing and doesn't have anything else to say.
We've got a report that you recently threatened a minor, Benny Messina.
I never threatened anyone. I just asked him to tell the truth about my son.
And what was that?
That he's innocent. He's not a car thief.
He's a great kid.
Mr. Fernandez immediately puts both oars in the water and begins to row across the lake. Everybody in the world is lying except Mr. Fernandez.
Well, the one thing that you can't deny is the .22 revolver we found in your home.
I have no idea how that got there. I've never even handled a gun.
Well, if that's the case, it leads me to believe it belongs to your son.
No, absolutely not.
Settle down.
Jose Sr. just absolutely could not accept even really a pretty minor judgment that his kid was not a great kid.
Would you be willing to do a gunshot residue test?
Sure.
We do a GSR test on Fernandez Sr. to show whether he fired or handled a handgun in the past 24 hours or so.
Kenda is hopeful the GSR test will cement Jose Sr. as the shooter.
When we are able to conduct that test, we come up with the negative results.
So Fernandez Sr., despite his bravado, certainly we have him being an astounding liar, but we don't have him pulling a trigger.
With Jose Sr. ruled out as possible shooter, Kenda turns his attention to Joe Jr.
Fernandez Jr. is different than his father in the sense that he does have a criminal past. It's a minor criminal past. It's petty offenses.
Relax, your dad's not here. I just want to get your side of the story, okay?
Okay, sure.
And he says he had been with Benny and Robert earlier that evening, met him at a 7-Eleven, and they had a couple of beers.
We were just out talking for a little bit, and then I left and took off and went home. I don't know what they did after that.
And that's the whole story?
Yeah. Do you really think I'd hurt my friends?
Well, I'd like to get a couple swabs of your hands.
All right.
Officer?
We take the GSR kit from Joe Jr. after explaining to him what it is. And you could see it in his face. Like, uh-oh, he knows that that's going to be positive.
Sir, actually, I do have something I need to tell you. I remembered something. I went target shooting this morning, so that test might come back positive.
Oh, really? With the gun you don't have? He looks at me. He said, well, there was this other kid I know. What other kid?
I don't know.
You know a lot, do you? They come back with a test result. They're positive. And now, little Mr. Arrogant is scared to death.
Lieutenant?
When I was about to go after him about all the lies,
The hospital called Benny Messina has been cleared to give his statement.
All right, tell him on the way.
now Benny being awake is a lot more important to me. As I was leaving that room, I looked at Joe Jr. and I said, you know, when you shoot people, you gotta make sure they're dead. We have confronted the Hernandez family, senior and junior. Now we have the opportunity to talk to a living victim, a rarity in these cases.
After questioning both Joe Jr. and Jose Sr., Kenda heads back to the hospital to speak with Benny Messina. Kenda's hopeful Benny can spell out exactly what happened the night of the shooting.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda. I'm sorry about what happened.
His neck, of course, is heavily bandaged, and he's distressed over the death of his friend. But he's willing and able to tell me what happened.
Well, all this trouble kind of started when we stole the teacher's car. I don't know why Joe was denying it. If he would have just confessed, like me and Robert, we'd probably just get probation, too.
So Joe Jr. was angry at you for testifying?
Oh, no. I mean, he told me that he knew why we were doing this, like he understood it, but his dad was still really pissed at us.
Want to walk me through what happened that night?
He says that he and his friend, Robert, are making a coffin in Benny's garage for a Halloween party they've been invited to.
Okay, do it. This is so sweet. Dude, this is awesome.
They're laughing about death, and little do they know that Halloween's going to get very real for them in a short amount of time.
Oh, it's going to scare a lot of kids.
They're getting ready to leave.
Hello?
They get called by Jose Jr., wants to get together.
According to Benny, a few hours later, they met up with Joe Jr. at the party.
What's up, dude? So, what do you guys want to do?
I was thinking we could just drive around and see what's going on.
Parents want me home by midnight.
Screw that. Let's get out of here.
They end up off Circle and Hancock in a new construction area.
There was some construction barriers still up there, kind of stopping cars from going through the road.
Wait, why are we here? Help me move this barricade.
Okay, but what are we even doing here?
It's Devil's Night. Steal something.
Like what? Oh, this blinky light. Oh. Come on, let's go check out what they got. Come on.
And Joe Jr. drives the car into an even darker area.
Benny tells Kenda that's when things took a dangerous turn.
Check this out. Whoa, is that a real gun? Yeah? Let's play Russian roulette.
No way, man.
Fine. Dance for me.
What the hell, man? Are you nuts?
I'm gonna shoot you for narking on me.
Benny sees him go down. He turns his face away from the gunfire, taking that grazing wound in his head.
What are you doing, man? Oh my God, man. It was an accident.
What do you mean it was an accident? You just shot me.
And all of a sudden, Joe Jr. has a change of heart. Is he overcome by the guilt of what he's done?
Let me get you to a hospital. Come on. Come on.
Benny is scared to death. He has suffered a grazing gunshot wound, but it bleeds profusely. So Benny gets in the car. What about Robert? And Joe says, he's dead. Let's go.
Your next thought is, I need to get away from this person. How am I going to start doing that?
Okay, hurry up, bro. I'm bleeding everywhere.
I am. We have to go get my dad first.
What? Why? We're like 10 minutes away from the hospital.
Look, my dad will know what to do in a situation like this. We have to go get him. Dude, I am so sorry.
I was in his car, and I thought he was bringing me to the hospital, but he picked up his dad.
Dad gets in the car and takes over.
Where's Costello?
Dead.
Benny thinks they're going to go to St. Francis Hospital, but Joe Jr. turns the other way. He has no idea what to do.
Where are we going?
Shut up. It's time for you to join your friend Costello.
So Benny decides he's got to try to save his life.
He decided to grab the steering wheel and yanked it real hard to the right.
And they lose control of the car.
You little bastard! That's it!
Joe Sr. is furious when the car stops. Drags Benny out of the car and proceeds to punch and kick him in the face and chest.
Benny claims that's when Joe Jr. took out the gun and fired one final shot into the back of his head.
That'll do it.
Benny is smart enough to play dead, and then he waits to make certain they're gone. He feels a lump in his neck. He doesn't know what that is.
That's the bullet that travels around the skull and comes lodged in the neck. Anybody else probably would have killed him. It just wasn't his day.
And he sees a light. It's a house. And he staggers toward that house to get help. That is a remarkable story.
Benny Messina's statement cements the case against Jose Fernandez Sr. and his son, Joe Jr.
Everything that the major accident team investigated said happened was corroborated by Benny.
We had the tire tracks at both scenes. And our traffic experts are able to look at these and say the pattern is absolutely consistent.
In my mind, it appears to me, obviously, that Senior is the architect of this entire affair.
Dad actively participated in this. He endangered other lives because he couldn't accept the fact that maybe his son did do an auto theft.
Joe Fernandez Jr. pleads guilty to second-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder and is sentenced to 32 years. Jose Fernandez Sr. is convicted of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and second-degree kidnapping. He is sentenced to 30 years in prison.
The real tragedy here is that these young men's lives were ruined. Benny, somehow by a miracle, survived, but will always be dealing with the aftermath of these events.
Robert had his whole life ahead of him. He's a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate. It's a tragedy that somebody had to take his life out there that night.
Who would believe that a father, in the supposed desire to save his son, destroy his son, himself, and his own family, ultimately over nothing?
Rain claws at the windows like a thief that knows your name. Glasgow, 1991. A city of orange sodium lamps and wet cobbles, of pub doors coughing out smoke and secrets, of tenements that listen better than people do. A phone rings in the dark. 2 tones, then the hush, then a third that feels like a warning. A dispatcher's voice, clipped, steady, the cadence of routine before the world tilts. Suspicious noise reported. Alley off Saatchi Hall Street. Possible disturbance, possible assault. Units roll. Tires fizzle on puddles. Blue lights slice the rain. And in the hum of the city that never fully sleeps, something old begins. Cold case, whispers the future. Mysterious disappearance, hisses the headline that hasn't been written yet. Shock to community, promises the anchor who hasn't learned the victim's name. She is 21, or maybe 22. Reports will disagree and never fully align, and she loves paperbacks with cracked spines, dog-eared maps, the way the Kelvin murmurs under bridges. She closes at a cafe, counts the till twice, laughs at a joke about a missed bus, says goodnight to a coworker who will replay that goodbye for decades like a cursed tape. An umbrella in one hand, keys in the other, she steps into the rain. The clock is a quiet accomplice. 12:41 a.m. Footsteps. The wet smack of rubber on stone. She passes a shuttered florist, a poster stapled crooked, a bus shelter blinking its neon promise of timetables that don't include her. A man across the street lights a cigarette. His face pops out of the night and then erases itself. A taxi idles, then rolls away. The city breathes in. It does not breathe out. The call comes at 2:17 a.m. A scream or something like it, then nothing. Officers fan out with torches that look weak against the drizzle. An alley gives back echoes in a crushed paper cup. A fire escape rattles at the touch. A door that should be locked isn't. There is a smear on the sill, not quite blood, not quite mud, the color of doubt. A constable kneels, gloved, careful, methodical, the rituals of procedure like beads on a rosary. Photographs, measurements, voices on radios. Copy. Affirm. Stand by. The rain keeps time. A stranger watches from a third-floor window and pulls the curtain shut, the fabric sagging like a secret. Morning comes with headlines that suspect and accuse without names. Possible abduction near city center. Police seek witnesses. If you saw anything, if you heard a voice, if you remember a car door. She is given a shape by absence. She is silhouette, outline, chalk line without chalk. Friends call. She doesn't answer. Her mother dials all the numbers in her book, then dials them again. Her father visits the cafe and drinks a coffee he cannot taste. A black pool that reflects the ceiling. Coworkers hang posters in the damp, the ink bleeding into the paper like grief into days. The city tilts in that minor way cities tilt when something terrible might have happened, but nobody knows when the might will drop off the sentence. Detectives arrive with coats that smell of wool and impatience. They take a map and stab it with colored pins. Home, work, bus stops, alley, the path between. They draw a line and call it a route. They walk it themselves, once in daylight, once at midnight. They count steps. They note a security camera that stares at the wrong corner. They talk to the night shift cleaner at the department store. He heard a scuffle, but it might have been bins. They talk to the barman sweeping bottle caps from under stools. He saw her earlier maybe, or someone like her. They talk to the cabbie who thinks he took her as far as Charing Cross. They talk until the word talk is just air moving in and out of rooms. A whisper reaches them from the edges. A man in a green jacket, a scar under his jaw, a car with one headlight duller than the other. A van idling near the alley, white but dirty, old but not ancient. They chase the whisper. They find 100 green jackets, 1,000 old vans, a city of scars. They find a neighbor who heard a laugh that turned into a cough. They find a stray dog whining at a gate. They find nothing that can be called proof without being laughed out of court. The case opens like a mouth. It swallows time. Cold case. The phrase doesn't arrive for years. It grows in the margins, in the cupboards where files sit like winter. Detectives retire. New ones inherit. The map yellows. The pins loosen and fall one by one like teeth. But that first week, nobody says cold. Everyone says soon. There's a beat to it. A newsroom drum. Developments expected. Appeals issued. Lines of inquiry ongoing. The mother learns to speak to cameras with a voice that doesn't break until she's off screen. The father carries a red folder to every meeting, every briefing, every desperate suggestion. The folder's corners soften. The inside holds clippings, photocopies, a letter to his daughter he will never send because he does not know where to post it. Witness 1. A student on a bicycle, late, soaked, swears he saw a figure by the phone box, female, head down, umbrella like a black crown. Witness 2. The man with the cigarette has no useful details, his memory fog like the glass of the bus shelter. Witness 3. A homeless veteran who knows the city's breaths and coughs by heart, says a van passed twice, slow, like a finger reluctant to push a bruise. They are fragments. Each fragment promises the whole. Each fragment turns up an hour too late, a day too late, a lifetime too late. The detectives puzzle them on a board. The pattern refuses to appear. They manufacture a pattern out of stubbornness. It collapses at the first real question. The alley yields one more whisper, a single stud earring, dull silver, inset stone, cheap but cherished. It sits in an evidence bag like a captured moon. The family confirms it without saying the word confirm. The detective writes down the confirmation with a hand he keeps from shaking. The earring is a milestone and a tombstone. It says she was here. It refuses to say where she went. Forensics work the smear from the sill. The sample is small, the lab is busy, the wait is long. When the result arrives, it says what so many results say. Insufficient, inconclusive, but suggestive of. Suggestive of what? The sentence doesn't end. It trails out of the report like a thread that leads nowhere. We talk about the city as if it is neutral land, but it isn't. It takes sides. It echoes the rumor it prefers. It edits its own past. Glasgow shrugs and bears, laughs and sings, keeps counsel, keeps count. In the pubs, the story boils and cools. A jealous boyfriend. She didn't have one. A stranger from the motorway. Saatchi Hall is not the motorway. A disgraced doctor, a traveling musician, a bouncer with bad hands. The rumor wheel spins until it is just a hypnotist's coin. People watch it and forget to blink. The mother starts to walk the road at night with a friend, 2 figures under one umbrella, defiant. Someone knows, she says, to reporters, to passing cars, to the rain. Someone knows, and if the rain could answer, it would shrug. In a patrol car, a young constable keeps a notebook strictly, writes down faces and plates and patterns that might be patterns or might be desperation's embroidery. He is new, and new means he believes in the clean line between effort and result. He follows a van with a dent in its rear door. He takes down a plate. He visits a garage that fixes such dents and asks questions until the owner's patience thins like cheap tea. He writes the answers down anyway. The van belonged to a man who moved. No forwarding address. Not unusual. These things happen. He checks 3 empty flats in a house with its curtains closed in the afternoon. He learns the first lesson of a cold case before the case is cooled. You can do everything right and learn nothing. Days stack. Weeks congeal. A season turns in the hush between appeals. The detectives sit with routine as if routine were a person who can be persuaded. Files get tabs. Tabs get sub-tabs. A woman at a desk writes the same words so often they begin to sound like a prayer. Any information, however small. A tip arrives written in block capitals, the pen pressed so hard it tears the paper. The tip claims certainty. The certainty evaporates under light. Another tip comes, this one in the unsteady hand of guilt. It leads to a shed that smells of oil and grass. The shed contains nothing but a lawnmower and the smell of last summer trapped in wood. They write the visit down anyway. Everything goes in the book. The book becomes a tower. The tower leans. Let's cut to the trace on the master tape. CCTV, grainy, low res, a courtroom's worst enemy, a newsroom's best friend. Outside a late-night shop, a camera catches a figure in a dark coat pausing, turning, moving out of frame. Another figure follows 3 seconds later. Is it her? The distance between frames becomes the distance between hope and error. The detective zooms until the pixels are the size of beans and just as legible. He prints the stills and pins them on the wall because you must pin something on the wall. The mother stares at those squares until her eyes water, then nods, then shakes her head, then does neither, then sits down because her legs have become ideas instead of bones. The city gives up a footprint, then another. The forensics team casts plaster and patience. The tread pattern is common. The size suggests average. Average becomes a kind of cruelty. The police ask for the public's help. The public offers help in the shape of the public. A man swears he saw her on a bus the next day. He is wrong, but believes himself. A woman says she heard a van door slam at 2:20, a fact that nestles against the call at 2:17 like teeth in a zipper. Together they make a sound like closure. Apart, they are just noises in a storm. We follow the Kelvin downstream, where the bridges hold their breaths. We look in the brambles for a miracle. We walk the canal path early, before the joggers, before the dog walkers, before the city has a chance to put on its face. Every cold case grows a ritual, a choreography of search and hope. Volunteers learn to look into trees as if trees are rooms. They learn to scan ditches as if ditches keep diaries. They find bottles, a shoe with no foot in it, a cemetery of umbrellas. They learn to keep their faces calm when the police bag something and carry it away. Heads turned slightly so the cameras can see their profiles and think, stoic, brave, strong. Inside, the volunteers are noise. The detective visits the mother's house on a Tuesday because grief prefers Tuesdays. He sits at a kitchen table that smells like lemon and tenacity. He says there are updates, but not the kind that change anything. He promises to call. He calls. He promises to visit. He visits. He translates procedure into human. He explains why some searches end and others continue. He explains the budget without saying money. He holds the red folder when the father's hands give up. He leaves every time with a biscuit wrapped in a napkin he will never eat but always keep until it becomes unrecognizable at the bottom of his pocket. These details matter, though they solve nothing. They keep the shape of the case warm. There is a rumor of a pattern elsewhere. A case in Dundee, a case in Manchester, a case in a coastal town where the wind scours the paint from railings. The detective makes calls, attends briefings in rooms that smell like plastic chairs. Profiles are discussed. The word opportunistic is said too often. The phrase known to police obscures more than it reveals. A man with confidence sells a theory with a pointer and a charm that curdles. The detective listens, writes notes, and then goes back to Glasgow because cases are local even when monsters travel. He looks again at the alley. He looks at the window with the curtain. The curtain looks back. A year passes. The calendar dares the family to breathe. They do, because you cannot negotiate with lungs. Memorials that are not memorials gather at the cafe that is not a shrine. Candles that gutter in the breeze. Photographs that start to look historical before history has the decency to arrive. The mother reads a statement. She has learned to time her commas to camera shutters. The father says nothing because he cannot trust what his voice would do to the air. The city wears their faces in bus shelters and on lampposts like medals it did not earn. There is a march, quiet, orderly, rainproof. The signs say her name. Names are anchors. Names are knives. The march moves like a river that refuses to flood. The detective, older now by months that feel like years, sits with the forensics report again. He looks at the smear and sees a future where a laboratory can wring truth from a pinprick. Not yet, the present tells him. He writes a memo in a tone that asks politely for time to move faster. He files it. He stores a copy in his desk, as if keeping a seed in a dry place. He begins to learn the new liturgy. That technology moves, that evidence waits, that patience is not resignation. He imagines a headline that begins with the words, long-awaited break. He imagines reading it aloud to the mother in the lemon kitchen. He imagines the sound she would make, neither sob nor laugh, but something that is both. And still, the city lives. Buses run. Pints are poured. The rain starts new rumors on clean pavements. People step around the hole in the air where she should be as if it were a construction site. They promise themselves not to look back down that alley when they pass it, then fail, then pretend they didn't. The window's curtain remains. The neighbor who owns it has moved and been replaced twice. Each new tenant inherits the habit of closing it at midnight. Ask them why, and they'll shrug, say it feels right. Ghosts are just habits with better stories. By the end of that first year, the file has grown fat with everything but the thing. A superintendent asks for results and is handed diligence. A reporter asks for a quote and is given hope. The cafe replaces the till. The umbrella, the keys, the walk, the bus shelter, all of it becomes a diorama the city visits with polite silence. But there is a pulse under it. There is a beat that refuses the finality of silence. It is the beat that keeps detectives sitting in parked cars at odd hours, watching doors that never open. It is the beat that keeps the mother's porch light on longer than necessary, a lighthouse for a ship that might be a rumor, that might be a miracle. Cold case, says the file. Not closed, says the pulse. We leave the year on a held note, not cliffhanger, not twist, just the sustained tone that hums under every unsolved story. The ledger with a line unbalanced, the sentence without its period, the city with one light forever on in a second-floor window. The rain does not apologize. The alley never confesses. The smear refuses to bloom into a name. But something else takes root in the quiet, an endurance that is not glamorous, a certainty that is not loud. It whispers to anyone who will listen, time is not an accomplice. Time is just another witness, and one day it will talk. Morning briefings turn into rituals, and rituals turn into anchors when the tide of facts refuses to rise. At Pitt Street, the incident room wakes before the sun, strip lights buzzing like irritated bees, kettles hissing, photocopiers warming to their task. A detective inspector taps the map with the patient fury of a metronome. Route, window, witness, van. The words lose their edges through repetition, become sound effects in a loop. Files are shuffled like decks that never produce a winning hand. Photographs are rotated on the wall to trick tired eyes into a new perspective. The city outside yawns and shudders to life. Buses shouldering the morning, newspapers crowning the pavements with damp headlines. Missing student, police appeal. Cold case? Not yet, the day insists. Not while the coffee is hot and the notes are crisp and the street is still fresh with footprints that might remember. We walk the lane again, because that's what you do. You wear a groove into the city until the city decides to give. Cones blink like mechanical eyelids at the cordon's edge. The rain has paused, holding itself politely in the wings, and the air smells like tarmac and tiredness. A sergeant kneels beside the door with the bad lock, the one that opened too easily that night, and tests it with a gloved hand. It mouths open like a word learned wrong. A photographer leans in, and the flash startles a gull into lifting off the roof with an indignant shriek. Evidence markers sprout, little plastic flags in a war no one admits is being fought. There is a hair caught in the hinge, thin as a lie. It's lifted with tweezers and promised a future in a lab more capable than today. There's a convenience store on the corner that acts like a confessional. People come in for milk and leave absolved of detail. The owner, a man who looks older than yesterday, stands behind a counter that smells of scratch cards and menthol and tells the detective what he tells him every day. Somebody came in around 2, somebody bought cigarettes, somebody forgot their change. The detective smiles with the politeness of desperation, writes it down again, because the script demands that every line be delivered on cue. Outside, the pavement is a library of shoe prints and gum stars. We tell ourselves we can read it. We tell ourselves the city's skin holds memory like heat. Cut to the cafe, where her absence makes the furniture look ashamed. Chairs sit too politely. The chalkboard offers soup with an optimism that feels like a dare. Coworkers move through the motions with the precision of trauma. Wipe, stack, brew, smile. The manager keeps the radio low, as if loud music might accidentally play the song she loved and detonate the morning. A detective sits near the window with a notebook and orders tea, then forgets to drink it, watches the door that doesn't swing. A woman in a raincoat asks after a poster. "We've put new ones in the window," the barista answers, the words coming from a place that is both practiced and raw. The poster's edges curl, drinking the city's damp. A passerby stops, looks, tilts their head in the universal posture of concern that can be adopted and dropped in the space between traffic lights. Our narrative loves a suspect, a silhouette that absorbs the rain. The board on the wall obliges. Faceless man, green jacket, scar under jaw, van with dull headlight. Each becomes a character on whom the city hangs its unease. A beat cop remembers breaking up a scuffle outside a club. Was that the jacket? A nurse recalls patching a cut under a jaw. Was that the scar? A mechanic swears he saw a van with one eye sleepy. Was that the van? They are the bones of a story the detectives try to muscle into life. They send officers to doors that haven't seen a knock at that hour in years. Can we ask, do you mind if... It's probably nothing but polite incursions into privacy, traded for the currency of fear. Some cooperate with the zeal of the righteous, some reluctantly with the boredom of the busy, some not at all, faces shuddering like the windows of empty flats. Meanwhile, the old bureaucracy refuses to be romantic. Forms must be filled, signatures must be gathered, warrants must be argued for with words that don't leak emotion. A young fiscal listens, taps a pen, weighs probable cause on scales that do not care about mothers' kitchens or the way a city inhales before a siren. "This isn't a film," he says with his eyebrows, and the detectives nod because they know it isn't, but their hearts keep playing the trailer anyway. They get a warrant for a lockup by the river, a place that smells of oil and endings. Inside, tires stacked like vertebrae, a calendar from last year, a radio tuned to nothing, 2 cigarette ends that go into bags, a smear that looks promising until the lab informs them it is motor oil and wishful thinking. Call it the first pattern. On Mondays, tips pour in, fat with weekend hindsight. On Tuesdays, interviews run long and civility runs thin. Wednesdays bring the press, cameras blooming like sudden flowers outside the station doors, microphones elongated like curious eels. Do you have any leads? The detective says, we are following a number of lines of inquiry, the sentence that is a life jacket made of air. Thursday is for lab calls that say soon. Friday is for the family, the kitchen table with lemon and tenacity, the biscuit wrapped in a napkin and slipped into a pocket where it will become a fossil of good intentions. Saturdays are quiet, or pretend to be, and Sunday evening is the cliff where hope teeters, counting the lamps in tenement windows and making bargains with nothing. There's a bitter joke that floats up in rooms where no one is laughing. Every city has an alley like this, a paragraph you skip past until the news tells you not to. Glasgow, generous and sharp, knows it has many paragraphs. The lanes behind music venues, the spaces where delivery trucks rest and chew the dark, the bridges that cross water as if daring it to rise. Our victim's route was a string threaded through them, and somewhere a hand tugged. A veteran detective, the kind whose memory is a filing cabinet with the drawers removed, sits with a junior and tells him how cases go sideways. It's not the big thing you miss, he says. It's the small thing you don't think is a thing. The junior nods, writes small thing in his notebook as if it can be underlined into existence. We stare again at the earring, the single stud, cheap but cherished, bagged like a star under amber. A forensic tech talks about trace metal analysis in a voice like prayer, composition, manufacturing batch. Where in the world these studs were sold in crates too heavy to lift without a forklift? The answer, when it comes, is infuriating, everywhere. Ubiquity is the enemy of inference. But inside the back of the stud, there's a smudge the team coaxes into a partial print of skin oil, and whatever the world sticks to you when you're not looking. They send it up the line. They wait. The reply is a shrug typed in official language, partial match to nothing, a promise that technology might grow teeth by and by. Not today. On the screen, grainy frames, the CCTV that plays like a threat. A figure pauses at the edge of a late-night shop and turns half her face to the camera. Maybe her, maybe not. Behind, another figure, heavier, hat brim, shading features into anonymity. The gap between them is 3 seconds and a country mile. The camera cycles to a roll of scratchy static, returns to the street, and both figures are gone. The detective watches it, not for the 100th time, but for the 1,000th, and tries not to invent meaning in the way the streetlight stutters, or how the rain looks like confetti burning upward. He shows it to the team because you show what you have, even if what you have is doubt. The room leans forward, a single organism with one breath. Nobody says, that's her. Nobody says, that's him. Everybody says nothing, and the silence is a verdict with no charge attached. The press calls it a city on edge because headlines prefer edges to aches. They ask for quotes that shiver. The mother delivers words with steel that would bend cars. If you know anything, she says to a camera, to a living room where a viewer is retreating into a cushion, to a kitchen where a ladle pauses over a pot, to a bedroom where someone considers the weight of a secret. If you know anything at all. Her voice doesn't break, but it carries breakage like light carries dust. The father stands beside her, his hands folded around the red folder as if it were the last solid thing in a world gone soft. After, a reporter asks how they're holding up, and the look the father gives is a slow door closing. There are questions that seek sound bites and questions that brush old wounds. He refuses to be the day's content. He lets the folder answer for him, and it says, "We contain multitudes of paper, and none of them are her." In a different corner of the city, a man who prefers night to day polishes a dented van door with the devotion of ritual. He is not necessarily our man. That's the trouble with fear. It rehearses guilt into strangers. He goes to work at odd hours and pays cash and keeps his head down. He has a neighbor who hears nothing through thin walls and a landlord who can never remember his name. He is ordinary until you lay a transparent overlay of rumor on top, and then he becomes the face you carry home in your pocket, the one you insert into every dark corner until your heartbeat writes a narrative your head can't footnote. Policing was not invented to massage neuroses, but sometimes it feels like that's the job. The team brings in a face from the past, a profiler whose voice belongs on television. He lays out arcs: opportunist, planner, local, outsider. He points to the map with the confidence of a weatherman promising a storm. Comfort with the area, he says. Awareness of routine. He intones about escalation as if pulling back a curtain on the future. The detective listens, nods, resists the urge to ask how many times comfort and routine were mapped onto ghosts. Still, the theater has its uses. The profiler's words filter into the public consciousness, make people attend to the corners they have edited out. A neighbor's memory is jogged. A man on the stairs at odd hours. A shopkeeper recalls a gloved hand in summer. The tips desk grows fat. Most of it is noise, white and seething, but every choir needs 100 wrong notes to produce the single true one. And there it is. A woman calls late, a voice small but steady. She saw our victim 2 nights before the vanishing, arguing in a doorway with a friend, or a man wearing the shape of a friend. She gives a description that is as general as rain, but she gives a detail that sticks like burrs. A keychain with a stag, antlers sharp, something she noticed in the way you only notice an object when the person holding it is trying to grip a world that is sliding. The detectives chase it, door to door, stag to stag. They find a souvenir shop that sells them by the handful, antlers slotted into cork boards that squeak. They buy one, plastic and cheap, and lay it in an evidence bag like a sacrament. It is a prop. It is an idea. But sometimes ideas make the next door open. We are not above coincidence. We just hate to depend on it. A constable clearing a backlog of petty reports stumbles on an incident from a week earlier. A complaint about a man following women near the canal path, offering to walk them for safety, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The description is so vague it could be a dozen men, and is also precise in the way that matters. Height, gait, that dome of a hat the CCTV confided to us. He notes the street. He notes the time. He ties a string on the board between that pin and the alley, and even if the string is metaphorical, something in the room tightens. 2 plainclothes go where the complaint was made, not to catch him in the act, because he is a storybook figure now, a cautionary tale, but to let the air remember their scent, to be seen, to see the rumor in reverse. Police are watching. Someone is paying attention. At night, the river rehearses Haitian myths beneath the bridges. On one of those nights, a call comes from a dog walker who doesn't like the way a car sits with its lights off near the old mill. Police attend. They always attend because sometimes the silly thing is the thing. The car is empty. The registration checks out. The glove compartment yields napkins and a map with a coffee ring over the motorway, and a packet of mints, and a used parking stub from a hospital. The boot contains a spare tire and the smell of rubber. Nothing, one of the officers says, and the other says, everything, because sometimes nothing is proof a city is normal, and you need that as much as the opposite. We pivot not because the narrative demands it, but because life does. A woman comes in with a story from 1989, a near miss, a hand on her elbow that turned into a vice, a voice that said her name without having earned the right to know it. She shook him off. She ran. She never reported it because what's the point? Now becomes the point. She remembers his breath. She remembers his boots. She remembers the embroidery on his jacket that read something like Mac, and then a smudge of syllables. The detectives comb through trades, companies with vans, logos that make men ordinary until you notice how often ordinary places men under your skin. McAllister Roofing, Mackenzie Removals, McCrae Electrical. They visit them all in a loop that makes the petrol receipts wince. They shake hands with foremen who smell of sawdust and strategies. They write down the names of men who were on sites then, in 1991, on nights when the city gave up its light to rain and bad timing. Is this where we find him? No, that would be a betrayal of both truth and tempo, but it is where the case grows teeth, small and patient. It is where the detectives stop treating the alley as a trap and start treating it as a stage that hosted a rehearsal for something practiced. They look at other cities again. Dundee, Manchester, a coastal town where the wind flays paint from railings and names from memory. They share notes with teams who are not them but could be in a mirror. A pattern emerges that is not yet proof, but is something like weather. Male, 30s to 40s then, comfortable in crowds, anonymous in daylight. A collector of roots, a lover of repetition. Opportunistic, yes, but only because he planned the opportunities. Back in Glasgow, the mother stops turning the porch light off at midnight. It burns now until 2, then 3, then until dawn. Neighbors stop asking if she's forgotten. They know habits that look like faith are not to be touched. On her table, beside the lemon and the police statements and the red folder and a floral mug that reads Mum in a font too cheerful for the room, she keeps the poster. She smooths the edges when they curl. She murmurs the same sentence every night like a bead on the rosary of time. Someone knows. Perhaps she says it to the rain, perhaps to the windows of tenements that see more than their owners, perhaps to the guilty, wherever they are, polishing a dent in a door that will never buff out. A rumor touches down like a tired bird. A new test. They speak of it in labs with hash marks on the walls that could be tallying hope. YSTR, mitochondrial, words that sound like coded messages. The detective files it under future and writes a memo whose ink might be dry when the breakthrough arrives. Preserve, store, maintain chain of custody. He speaks the chain aloud because in a world where the link between effort and result is fog, chains feel like spells. In the evidence room, shelves breathe dust and discipline. The earring sleeps in its bag, the smear in its tube. They are, for now, not answers but promises. Outside, Glasgow clears its throat, coughs up weather, sings. People live because to stop would be a conspiracy with the dark. But if you ask them quietly if the alley has changed their walk, many will say, yes, I cross earlier now, I call a cab sooner, I wait under the light, even if it buzzes, I text when I leave and when I arrive. This is how a city adapts, by layering a thin skin of caution over its bones. Shock becomes ritual, ritual becomes the new normal. The newspaper stops putting the story on page 1, it never leaves entirely. It migrates to the inside, then to memory, then to the place where memory waits with its jacket on. The headline rewrites itself on rainy nights when sirens find harmonies in the grid. Mysterious disappearance. Cold case grows colder. Community still haunted. We do not end here. Not end. We will not end with a fade to black, not while there is the hum, the low, persistent note beneath the day's noise that insists time is not an accomplice but a witness. It sits now in the incident room, a presence you can lean your back against when the chair feels like air. It sits in the lemon kitchen, in a mug with a chip the shape of an island no one can name. It sits in the alley where the door with the bad lock has now been replaced and the hinge no longer offers hair to patient hands. It sits in a lab, in a tube, waiting for a future that will pronounce the syllables of certainty. And somewhere, in a pocket or a drawer or the bottom of a world where small things hide, a keychain with a stag waits too, its antlers catching the light, pointing at a door that will no longer hold. The second winter arrives like a judge with no face. The city is steel and breath. In the incident room, the heater coughs and concedes defeat. Coffee becomes a strategy, not a drink. The board is heavier now, fat with clippings, crowded with names that never asked to live beside red string. Revisit, the inspector says, and the word is a hammer on seasoned wood. Revisit the alley. Revisit the shopkeeper. Revisit the cabbie who thinks he drove her but isn't sure his memory belongs to that night and not another. Memory is a forger with a steady hand. It leaves signatures that look perfect until you hold them to the light. We go back to the bus shelter with the neon timetable that lies like a weatherman. The plastic roof still ticks when rain arrives. A detective stands where she might have stood. He measures how the streetlight throws a crescent of shadow like a trap. He times the walk from the cafe to the corner, then from the corner to the alley. He writes the numbers on a palm already tattooed with other nights. We talk to a security guard whose shift flips his life like a coin. He remembers a couple arguing 3 doors down, remembers not liking the shape of the man's shoulders, remembers a laugh that ended in a flat line. He cannot swear to the date. He can swear to the feeling. Wrong. Feelings don't make warrants. Feelings make insomnia. You might think the city is bored of us by now. It isn't. It is impatient, which is worse. There's a tabloid. There's always a tabloid that runs a mock-up of her face aged by a journalist with a mouse and a hunch. The eyes are older, the mouth set in survival. Where is she? The headline demands, as if the question hasn't been asked enough to wear grooves into the air. The family sees it on a rack at the supermarket and loads bread and milk and the paper into a trolley like artifacts for a ship that will not dock. At home, the mother folds the headline under the rest, like a sweater she cannot bear to look at but cannot throw away. In the lab, the smear is reborn as numbers and curves, and the numbers are like weather again, perhaps, likely, indicative of, insufficient. The technician apologizes with his mouth and fights with his eyes. He wants the future in his hands now, and it isn't fair that time refuses to be bribed. A consultant leans over the microscope and says words that smell like ozone. Alleles, loci, stochastic. He snips the sentence at the halfway point because hope is a finite element and must be rationed. Store it cold, he says. Store it honest. Chain of custody becomes a hymn the evidence officer sings under his breath while recording everything twice. We flirt with the idea of the friend, the man in the doorway the witness remembers, because narratives like to circle home before they venture into the forest. He is called in. He sits under 2 white lights and folds his hands like someone who learned to calm himself before teachers and policemen. He speaks of that night with a clarity that scares him. They argued, yes. It was about something that looks in hindsight like nothing, a shift schedule, a promise made late and broken early. He told her to text when she got home. She told him to worry less and live more. He did not walk her because he was stubborn in the way 20-somethings are, convinced the future will always bend before his schedule. He cries when he says it aloud, and the detective knows grief from guilt, even if they share the same suit and haircut. The man is not our man, but he is every man who learns too late the geometry of regret. The van returns like a migraine. It is every van in the city. It is one van specifically. And the Paradox choose days. They run plates, they pull lists, they cross-reference repair invoices for headlamps and dents and alignments gone wrong. A hit lights up like a flare. White van, single headlight replaced at a garage off Maryhill Road 2 days after the disappearance. The owner is a contractor with a surname that starts with Mac and a habit of paying late. His hands are nicked with work and his smile is plausible. He knows the route. Everyone knows the route. He knows the alley. Everyone knows the alley now. He knows nothing, he says. He offers his keys and his schedule and his car, the way innocent men do when fear hasn't yet explained the rules. They take casts of his tires. They photograph the interior's hills of dust. They pull fibers from a seat that remembers everyone who ever sat there and tells the truth about none of them. The lab will call. The lab will always call later. Neighbors become cartographers of routine. On Tuesdays, she walked home with a book and a bag with a broken zip. On Fridays, she shared a takeaway with a friend who told jokes that deserve better delivery. On Saturdays, she visited her grandmother and returned with leftover tartan biscuits in a tin tinier than memory. The grandmother is a lighthouse with eyes like clean glass. She says she knew the storm was coming because storms write letters to old bones in advance. She speaks of her granddaughter as if she is still on the cusp of the door, which is both defiance and denial, and who among us has the right to separate them cleanly? We bring in dogs because dogs know the world as a poem written in scent. They work the lane, the door with the bad lock, the path to the river, the stretch of street where the camera blinked us into ignorance at the crucial moment. They lead, then lose, then circle, then lie down as if the weight of the assignment exceeds the grammar of their bodies. The handler apologizes to the dog out loud, a kindness learned through years of calling expectations to heal. The detective crouches, scratches an ear, and feels the ridiculous impulse to whisper the whole case into fur as if fur were a vault installed by God. False starts breed rituals. A senior detective cleans his desk before each new push, arranging pens, aligning paper clips, smoothing the crease in his map as if respect could disarm chaos. A junior updates spreadsheets that blossom with entries like a fever chart. A family liaison officer chooses his tie with superstition disguised as taste. The cafe manager replaces the poster when edges sog, and the barista cuts the tape with a little flourish like a christening. The mother rewinds the answering machine to listen for nothing and receives it, pure, unbroken, again. These are not solutions, but they keep the compass pointed. We put the profiler back in front of the map because sometimes theater is the only door left that isn't locked. He talks about stutter step offenders, about rehearsal and improvisation, about appetite that learns to mimic restraint. He points to crossings, to bollards, to the comfort bubble around certain corners. He says the man we seek is unknown to us and also already on the board. The room accepts the paradox because Paradox is our landlord now and he never fixes the leak. The profiler's prediction is a spark that doesn't find tinder, but it travels anyway, bounces through phone lines and headlines and late-night conversations on sofas where couples upgrade their locks before sleep. We find the caretaker of a car park who loves counting. He has kept a notebook for years, a ledger of arrivals and departures, a taxonomy of plates. He scrawls in block letters that lean forward like runners. He has an entry for the night in question, a van, white, with a dent low on the rear door, arriving at 1:53, leaving at 2:26. The time is precise because his clock is precise because he does not forgive machines for lying. He didn't see the driver. He did see a shape carrying something not heavy, not light. He has lived too long with shadows to assign fat to a silhouette. He did not think to tell anyone because you lot didn't ask me, he says, eyes salty with umbrage and glee. The detective swallows a retort about posters, appeals, door to door. He says, "You're telling us now," and writes the times with a pen that works like a wish. At 2:26, the car park empties a vein onto a road that runs toward the canal. At 2:26, another camera, older, paler, catches a rectangle of white light. A van? A promise? Moving through rain thick enough to have opinions. They cannot improve the frame. They cannot enlarge the truth beyond its willingness to cooperate. They lay the still beside the caretaker's times, and the shape holds hands with the number. It is not proof. It is a conversation. We have learned to cherish conversations that do not end abruptly. The father's red folder grows a sibling, blue for guidance, for hope, for the days when red feels too much like an injury. He separates newspaper clippings by tone. He files speculative cruelty far from factual patience. He keeps letters from strangers who write in tight script about dreams where his daughter stands near a gate and says, "Tell them to look for the stag." He hates that he reads them all. He hates that he cannot prevent a line from imprinting and sending him down a path that ends at a locked fence in a muddy field with nothing in it but the old undressed skeleton of a trampoline. He brings the letters to the liaison officer. The officer thanks him with a face that promises to take every ghost seriously. He means it. We cast the van's tires and let the plaster dry into replica footprints. We compare the ridges to the road's cheeks in the alley and on the route to the car park. The similarities are the kind that defense lawyers snack on and call appetizers. We need something better. We need a voice. The call comes not as a confession, but as a tune hummed in the wrong key. A mechanic who remembers a man angry about waiting for a part, a man who called the headlamp an eye and blamed the garage for its blindness. He remembers because the language was off. He remembers because the man's hat did not suit the summer. He remembers a keychain on the counter while the man counted coins with the concentration of a monk, a stag, plastic, antlers intact. The mechanic isn't a saint. He is a man who likes details because they survive the weekend. He gives a name. The name is common. The surname is a Mac. The search box then lurches forward, then snarls again on a tangle of addresses. We knock on doors that have forgotten how to be surprised. We ask for the man whose name has too many cousins. We find a bedsit that holds the smell of damp conversations. We find a postcard on a wall from a coastal town where our other questions once walked the seafront. We find a wardrobe with an old jacket embroidered with letters half torn. Mac, something that dies under a threadbare seam. The tenant is gone. The landlord says he left 2 months ago, owing rent and an apology that arrived by rumor instead of phone. He left in a hurry, the way people do when time starts to speak their name out loud. We do the thing that never gets a montage. We wait with purpose. Surveillance is not a chase scene. It is a chair and a flask and a patience that erases your edges. We watch a lockup where the van once slept. We watch a cousin's house where family keeps its door ajar. We watch a pub where the man once lost money with energy, which is the only honest way to lose money. Hours pass, then days. Faces blur into a smear of almosts. Then, because life loves timing like a drum loves a hand, he arrives at the lockup in a different van with the same dent in his manner, hat, gait, that particular shoulder roll born of labor and pride. He opens the door and the smell of oil and old dust greets the night. He looks over his shoulder as if being watched were a superstition he rubs like a coin. We breathe very quietly. We do not move. We let him move through the frame of our patience. We bring him in without theater. He expects theater and is disarmed by routine, name, address, work. He offers a version of himself polished for official light. He is polite, and then a shade less so when politeness finds no purchase. He has an alibi shaped like fog for the night in question. Home, television, the memory of a plot he cannot pin to a channel. He says he never knew her. He says his van was on blocks then. He says anything that takes distance and stretches it between him and the alley until the string snaps and whips the room. We ask about the stag. He smiles like a man indulging a child's fancy and says, "Aye, everyone had one, didn't they? Souvenir shop under the bridge, 2 for £1. He is not wrong. He is also not neutral. We let him talk into his silence. We give him tea and time and a clock that ticks audibly to those who hear clocks when they lie. We test the jacket that once read Mac and now reads only Mac in our imagination. We compare fibers. We send what we can send to people who speak in spectra. We take a sample with consent written on a line beside a signature that tries to disguise its nerves. We call the lab. The lab says later, always later, because the future is a corridor that refuses to shorten itself for grief. He goes home because arrest without teeth becomes theater without audience. We watch him because watching is our breath now. He changes routes, he shuts curtains earlier, he starts wearing a cap without a brim, and the absence is the loudest statement he has ever made. The mother keeps the porch light on because it knows the choreography. The father adds a third folder, green for days when hope needs a companion the color of old fields. The city pretends at normality with sincerity and succeeds until it rains at the wrong tempo and everyone looks toward a lane that has more history than stone. We pivot again because this is a waltz, not a march. A letter arrives at the station in block capitals that want to be anonymous and fail. The writer knows a story about 1991, about a man who bragged when drunk about a girl who slipped like a fish, and a van door that didn't close right, and a keychain that broke and was replaced the next day. Antlers sharp. The letter names the pub. The letter names a friend who was a friend until that night. The letter says, I should have told you then. The letter ends with a sentence that feels like both curse and absolution. I couldn't carry it anymore. I couldn't. We unfold a map inside a map, lay the pub against the car park, lay the car park against the lane against the river, and the bridge and the shop whose camera blinked at the wrong time, and a path draws itself as if the city finally decided to confess in pencil. Is this resolution? Not yet. The lab still owns the word we need, but momentum has a sound, and the team hears it. A train 2 tunnels away, a kettle near boil, a crowd drawing breath before a verdict. We gather witness statements that corroborate like shy cousins holding hands. We trace the purchase of a headlamp. We track the return of a jacket to a charity shop that never kept records properly and never imagined it mattered. We collect the smell of rain on nights when the clock remembers 2:17 a.m. better than it remembers breakfast. We hold our nerve, we hold our breath, we hold the city's patience like a glass full to the brim. Somewhere the stag keychain exists or doesn't. Somewhere, the van that isn't his anymore still carries the ghost imprint of an old tire tread across its floor. Somewhere, in an envelope, under a staple, behind a rubber band, a hair waits to be understood by a machine that learned a new trick while we were busy apologizing to dogs and counting coins and rearranging paper clips into meaning. The door will open, the hinge will sing an old, relieved song, and when it does, everything we've carried will tilt toward a single point where edges sharpen and sentences end with periods instead of ellipses. Not yet, says the city. But soon, says a voice we've earned the right to hear. The city's patience phrase in quiet places first. Not at council meetings or on front pages, but in bus queues where strangers share the weather like a cigarette. In laundrettes where drums spin shirts and rumors at the same inert speed. Someone says they heard the police have their man. Someone else says the police always say that. Truth crouches between those sentences and waits for a better day. In the incident room, that day has not arrived. What has arrived is paperwork that reproduces like ivy and a thin thread of momentum that could either be a fuse or a hairline crack. We work as if it's a fuse. The letter with block capitals becomes a hinge in our chronology. We find the pub named in the confession that isn't. A place where carpet damp is a permanent season and the fruit machine coughs coins like bad lungs. The landlord has been here long enough to remember all the versions of himself. He recalls a regular from the early 90s, a man with a cap and quiet hands. The sort who drank to fade, not to flare. He remembers one night. The landlord's memory won't swear to dates, but will swear to moods. When the man talked too much, words loosened by cheap lager and a win on the horses. He said something about a van door and something about a girl who went quiet like the telly when the aerial slips. The bar leaned in. The man sobered to the angle of the room and laughed at himself, the panicked laugh of a house cat caught on a table. Joking, he said, as if jokes ever saved anyone. The landlord wrote it off as bravado until our faces made that decision untenable. He gives a name that rhymes with the one we carry. He gives a description that hugs our file like a cousin. We track the friend named in the letter because friendship is often the last bridge unburned. He answers the door with a suspicion he's worn so long it sits like a tailored suit. He denies knowing anything until the word stag leaves our mouth, and then his eyes betray him with a blink that lands like a gavel. He remembers the keychain, the antlers catching on the lining of a coat as a man fished for coins. He remembers the brag that wasn't brag, the story that slunk away when confronted. He remembers calling him an idiot. He remembers a silence afterward that wasn't normal silence, but the silence you grow around something sharp. He thought about going to the police. He thought about being wrong and what that would do to both of them. He thought himself into inertia, and inertia is the city's secret narcotic. He talks now because time has turned his thinking into a weight he cannot carry up the stairs anymore. He talks like a man tipping a bucket and watching filthy water run downhill. We lay our pieces on the table where evidence, rumor, and rainwater dry together. The van, the headlamp replaced 2 days after, the car park times, the pub, the friend's testimony, the jacket embroidered with a Mac before it shed its letters like a snake. We draw lines not with string, but with breath. In, out. The inspector leans forward until his knuckles whiten, and the map is a geography of veins. What we're missing, he says, is the thing that bites and doesn't let go. Teeth. That's what we ask the lab for, and the lab keeps tucking its hands into its pockets and promising tomorrow. Tomorrow finally shows its face in a technician's email that pretends to be casual and fails. A new run, a cleaner read, a set of numbers that hum in a frequency the database recognizes like birdsong. It isn't a full profile, the smear never promised us that. It is a partial that brushes up against a family group with the intimacy of a shoulder in a crowded train. Not him, not a name, but a kinship, a shadow of a surname in the genetics, the way a melody remembers the chorus even if the band has changed. The technician's caution is printed in italics and underlined, but the room reads the subtext. We have a corner of the jigsaw where the colors finally agree. Familial means door knocking with a new script. We are polite, we are relentless, we are ready to be hated. We visit men who share a father's distant cousin with our ghost. We drink teas we do not want. We accept biscuits we cannot taste. We listen to stories of aunties we will never meet and weddings where the cake fell. We ask for swabs with the kind of voice that confuses gratitude and grief. Mostly, people say yes. Sometimes, the door closes a little too firmly and a face steps back into the hallway shade. Those are the houses we return to. Those are the names we underline twice. This is not science without heartbreak. It is just heartbreak with sterile swabs. While the familial net spreads, another thread tightens in the scrap of our suspect's past. The van he drove in 1991 is long gone, sold for parts and then donated to a scrapyard with a name painted in a font that's been unfashionable since Thatcher. We go anyway, because scrapyards are galleries of what people think they can live without. The owner is a poet of corrosion. He remembers the van not specifically but archetypally. They all do, he says, white with secrets, dense that tell stories no one will footnote. He shows us records the size of hymnals and twice as dusty. There's an entry that could be ours. If not, it behaves like ours on the page. The van was stripped, shelled, its story melted down and poured into new shapes. We walk the yard the way monks walk cloisters, reverent for what steel knows. We find nothing named, but we find certainty in the negative space. If not recovered then perhaps never. If never, then all we have is what we kept, the earring, the smear, the city's muscle memory. The profiler returns not to preen but to listen. He studies the new arcs, familial hint, pub confession, caretaker's times, like a conductor learning a piece's true tempo after rehearsing it too fast. He's not a traveler, he says now, tapping the cluster that refuses to drift. He likes the loop that brings him back to where he can sleep. He suggests we look for the kind of work that makes a man invisible in daylight. Deliveries, repairs, removals, jobs that require access to back lanes and a calendar that laughs at clocks. The board in the room nods as if it had ears. We pull lists again, contracts from 1991 along the corridor where her route threaded. We match them to surnames that share a kinship with the partial profile's whisper. A line brightens like a fuse catching a dry patch. A small firm with Mac in its title, a payroll that includes our letter writer's former drinking mate. A contract the week of the disappearance 2 lanes over from the alley. The dates kiss. The inspector doesn't smile. He exhales in a way that makes the window fog. We go back to him because all roads do. We do it with less theater than an audience might prefer. Knock. Hello again. He feigns surprise that is more about habit than hope. We ask for another interview. He obliges the way a man obliges a storm. With a shrug and an internal inventory of windows, he sits. Name, address, work then, work now. We lay the headlamp invoice on the table between us like an accusation dressed as stationery. He says all headlamps break, Glasgow eats them. We lay the car park times. He says clocks are liars. We mention the pub and the friend and the brag. He says men say stupid things when drunk. The evening had been generous and he had been less so. We say stag, and the smile falters like a bridge that forgot a bolt. He changes it to a laugh that misfires. We mention the familial suggestion, the science that stood behind the door and now peeks through the keyhole. He calls it voodoo. He calls it guessing, dressed as math. He calls it anything that moves it away from his chair. We don't arrest him. Not yet. We let him stand, let him feel the corridor's long throat. We watch him walk as if the carpet has changed its grade. We station patience on both sides of his life. He is not a fool. He feels watched. He changes his walk by inches, which is how you can tell when a man is thinking about his walk. He burns the cap with the brim, or perhaps he bins it. The result is the same, a silhouette with a blank above. He cleans his van. He overcleans, which is a way of confessing to someone who isn't the law. The van glows with a zealotry that makes neighbors ask if he's selling. He says maybe. He says he likes things tidy. He says words that have never met before in his mouth. We receive what looks like a blessing and treat it like proof's shy cousin. The familial search coughs up a nearer branch, a man in his 50s with the same jawline and a fondness for darts. He gives a swab with the good grace of someone who likes being useful. The lab hums its song and then phones instead of emailing. The tech's voice is flat in the way adrenaline can be if you respect it. The partial lifts, the numbers dance with a tighter hold, the kinship grows teeth. It isn't a paternity test, it isn't a headline, but it is a path in a forest with boot prints we recognize. The surname on that man's line isn't our suspect's surname, but family trees are messy in ways paper never is. Half-brother, cousin through a mother, names that shift like smoke when the wind picks up. We trace, we knock, we learn who drifted away at Christmas and who never returned a call. We bend our arrows toward him again because the arcs lead there even if the names get lost in the branches. At the cafe that won't be a shrine, chairs scrape and tea cools, and a coat on a peg betrays the outline of someone who isn't coming back. The manager whispers to the liaison officer when the room has no customers. "Are you close?" he asks, like a child asking if summer is soon. The liaison officer never lies. "Closer than we were," he says. Words like that feel like fractions. The manager accepts them anyway. He has started closing the shop 5 minutes early on certain nights and cannot explain why even to himself. He locks the door and stares at the chalkboard until the chalk stares back. He rewrites today's soup in smaller letters as if a smaller day would hurt less. We are not magicians, but there is a trick everyone respects. Find something small that survived big things. The earring's twin. Everyone asks about it in whispers as if loud voices might scare it. If she wore a pair, where is the other? We have looked under the city's tongue. We have turned out pockets in bins and wet gutters that collect truths alongside cigarette butts. We get a call from a cleaner at a multi-story car park, the same one, different year. He is retiring, which makes people brave. He says they found an earring years ago in a crack in the stairwell, caught in a spiderweb of dust where only lost things go. He didn't tell anyone then because it was a cheap thing and he was tired and small things look smaller when you can't see the plot. He kept it in a drawer with loose screws and keys the tower forgot. He brings it in his palm like an apology. Cheap stud, dull silver, inset stone, the twin not exact but kin. The micro scratches on the back in the same restless pattern of a hand tugging, worrying, living. Forensics receives it like a midwife. They match its manufacturing signature to the first. They lift residue that rhymes with the smear's chemistry, the way air in a room remembers who breathed it if you ask nicely with a machine. There's no blood, there's skin oil too old to sing. There's nothing that a jury would clap for, but in the incident room it's as if someone opened a window that had been painted shut. The caretaker's times, the camera's rectangle of light, the pub's confession, the friend's confirm, the headlamp invoice, the familial brush, the twin earring from a crack that kept it secret like a monk, the alley's door that once opened wrong, the map with its veins. The inspector's knuckles relax. "We move," he says, and the word is a muscle. Move means warrants now. Move means search. Move means we stop apologizing for being certain. The judge reads our affidavit with eyebrows that dare us to waste her time. They lower as the arcs tighten and become a rope. We search the lockup with a light that respects corners. The floor dust speaks in layers. The old layer is a winter in 1991, and the new layer is last week's attempt to erase that winter. The difference is a palette change only a scientist would cheer. We cheer anyway. In a seam where the van's carpet once met a lip of metal, someone with faithful fingers pries out a thread of fabric that a human eye would call nothing. Under a microscope, it's a world, fibers twisted like a small planet's weather, a color between gray and night, a pollen grain hitchhiker that belongs to a plant that flowers near the canal path and not, say, in the lockup's postcode. We bag, we log, we thank the seam for being loyal to gravity and against intention. He answers the door as if doors are his last friends. We place the warrant between his domestic life and his plan to outweight us. He laughs, but it's a brittle sound like a ruler snapped in a schoolroom and quickly hidden. The search in his flat is choreography now. One team for the bedroom, one for the kitchen, one for the cupboard where men keep the tools they hope solve things. We find the ordinary litany of a life, receipts, mismatched socks, a calendar with days circled that mean nothing to us and everything to him. We find a box of old keychains, souvenirs of a man who learned once to make a ritual out of pockets. Among them, a stag without antlers, plastic scarred where a break ripped memory from shape. Was it his? Was it a friend's? Was it the city's? He shrugs with so much force his shoulders become theater. The shrug is a language that says, prove it, and provability is the only god in this temple. The lab takes the thread, the earring, the smear's echo that has waited like a saint in cold storage. The text speaks softly as if too much volume could frighten chemistry. When their call comes, it doesn't end anything. It aligns things. The thread belongs to upholstery used in models of vans that include his. The pollen on the thread remembers a flowering period that includes the week she walked under a sky that couldn't keep her. The partial profile hums the same song with greater conviction when sung beside the familial near hit. The antlerless stag was purchased from the shop under the bridge between March and May 1991, according to a ledger that only still exists because someone forgot to bin it when the shop changed hands. The smudge of a thumb on that old page doesn't match him, but it matches a man who worked for the same firm, a man who moved away to a coastal town and then moved back, a man who turns out to be his half-brother if you accept the family's tartan history, and a grandmother with a fondness for secrets. We do not cheer, we do not grandstand, we do what the city has taught us. We add the next right thing to the pile until the pile is undeniable. The inspector says the word we've held back like a final card, arrest. The clock above the map doesn't flinch. Outside, rain starts with a familiar, almost affectionate patter. In the lemon kitchen, the mother sits with a mug and a television remote she does not need and feels something move in the air, the low pressure before a storm that brings relief instead of ruin. At the cafe, the manager writes the soup in a bolder hand without meaning to. In the lockup, dust settles as if choosing a side, and in a hallway where keys sound like small bells, a door opens onto a future that is about to acquire sentences with periods instead of ellipses. The city breathes in. This time, it plans to breathe out. The knock comes before dawn. The sound is measured, deliberate, 3 times, a pause, then once more. Not frantic, not polite. Just the sound of inevitability arriving in uniform. Inside, he's already awake. Men like him don't sleep through endings. They feel them pacing the corridor before they reach the door. The light from the hallway catches dust and turns it to snow. He opens the door with a hand that tries to remember how to be steady. The detective's voice is the same one from interviews past, quiet, flat, professional, the tone of a man who has forgotten how to celebrate. You know why we're here. The suspect smiles a dry smile, one that doesn't involve the eyes. He says, no, but his voice has already confessed. The cuffs click, and the sound is smaller than you expect, like a lock catching on memory. Cameras are waiting outside because the city never truly sleeps. It only dozes with one eye open. A neighbor leans out of a window, phone in hand, half awake, half righteous. The flash makes the rain look like applause. He ducks his head as if the streetlights are too bright for someone who lived so long in the shadows. The van parked across the road, not his but similar, glints with cruel irony. It's always the van, the detectives think, always the machine that carries secrets from one end of a city to another until it rusts under their weight. The drive to the station is quiet, no shouting, no bravado. He stares at the window like he's looking for the version of himself that used to be reflected there, the one before the keychain, before the alley, before the silence. The detective in the passenger seat writes notes that he won't read again. The wipers keep time. The city slips past, still wet, still faithful to its ghosts. When they reach Pitt Street, the cameras have already migrated. Reporters swarm the gates like gulls over bread. Arrest made in 1991, cold case. The headline writes itself. Inside, the air smells like bleach and fatigue. He is booked, processed, fingerprinted, handed a paper cup of water he doesn't drink. The camera on the ceiling blinks red, 1 dot, steady, unblinking. He asks for a cigarette. He doesn't get one. In the interview room, the clock is louder than truth. Tape rolls. A detective's voice announces time, date, presence. We're here to ask about the events of August 1991. He closes his eyes as if that year were a room he swore he'd locked. His solicitor, older, calm, sits beside him with the posture of someone who knows history better than justice. The questions begin where they must, the route, the van, the night. He parries with silence, then sarcasm, then shrugs. They show him photographs, the alley, the earring, the headlamp invoice, the lockup, the thread, the stag. He looks at them like they're a collection of coincidences that have conspired against him. You've built a story, he says finally, but you've left out the ending. The detective replies, we're giving you a chance to write it yourself. He says nothing more for an hour. The DNA report sits on the table like a verdict that hasn't yet been read aloud. The scientist's summary is meticulous. Probability ratios, allelic patterns, statistics that lean in one direction hard enough to make math look emotional. A partial match within the same maternal line as the suspect. a thread that belonged to the same class of fabric used in his van model, a pollen grain that could only have clung to someone who stood within 10 meters of the canal path that night. Circumstantial, yes, but when combined, it stops being circumstantial and becomes orchestral. The detective reads it aloud, not for him, but for the room, as if saying the words will anchor them to reality. When he finishes, the silence is clean and deep. "Do you want to say anything?" the detective asks. The man stares at the tape recorder, its twin reels spinning like eyes that have seen too much. "Everyone forgets," he says finally. "You people never do." Outside, the press conference unfolds with the choreography of closure. After 34 years, the superintendent begins. "We have made an arrest in connection with the disappearance and presumed murder of a young woman in Glasgow in 1991. Flashbulbs pop. The word presumed hovers like smoke. The family stands behind the microphones, the mother holding the blue folder now creased at every edge, the father gripping her hand hard enough to leave a mark. She doesn't cry. She hasn't for years. She speaks into the microphones with a voice that carries the weight of every sleepless night. "We waited," she says. "We kept her name alive, and today, she's not just a story." A journalist asks if this brings closure. The father shakes his head. Closure is a word for people who don't remember. In the station, evidence passes from hand to hand like a relic. The stag keychain, the earring, the thread, the smear. They sit under lights in a line, silent witnesses that don't age. The detective runs a finger along the edge of a file. He's been chasing ghosts so long he's forgotten how to stand still. The lab calls again. New confirmation. The second earring carries a degraded trace consistent with her DNA profile, reconstructed from family samples. It's enough to bury the phrase possible connection under the weight of certainty. The report is sealed. The detective exhales for the first time in years. It feels like betrayal and relief, inseparable. The charge is formal now, murder. The words are read aloud under strip lights that flatten faces into masks. He listens, unmoved, until the name is spoken. Her name. And something in his jaw tightens, just once. The court date is set. Outside, the tabloids are printing extra pages before dawn. Glasgow, 1991, cold case solved, arrest shocks community. The same words that began this story now end it, a headline folded back on itself like a mirror. But solved doesn't mean settled. The city doesn't celebrate. Glasgow has learned to treat justice like rain. Necessary, cleansing, but never permanent. In the lemon kitchen, the mother sits with the mug that's gone cold again. She turns on the porch light out of habit and leaves it burning through daylight. In the cafe, someone has left fresh flowers under the poster. The chalkboard reads, "Today's special. Peace, if only for a day." The detective walks home past Saatchi Hall Street. The alley is still there, repaved, repainted, yet it hums with the residue of what it once held. He stops, just for a second, and listens. The rain whispers the same question it has asked for 34 years. Why her? The city still doesn't answer. Weeks later, the trial begins, and the courtroom fills with ghosts. Witnesses age in real time on the stand. The friend in the doorway trembles through testimony. The landlord recounts the drunken brag in words that sound like thorns. The mechanic describes the keychain, the headlamp, the strange calm of the man who waited. The forensics expert turns math into poetry, translating alleles and probabilities into the human vocabulary of truth. The defense cross-examines with the elegance of a drowning man. No body, no murder, he insists. But the evidence has grown bones of its own. The jury listens like a congregation at a midnight mass, silent, pale, reverent. In the gallery, the mother clutches a small pendant, one that once belonged to her daughter, found years ago in a drawer she couldn't open until now. The father stares straight ahead, unmoving. The city holds its breath. The verdict comes on the fourth day at 2:17 p.m., the exact minute of that first call 34 years earlier, though no one realizes it until much later. Guilty. The word lands without echo. It doesn't shout. It just exists, heavy and final. He bows his head. Whether in remorse or exhaustion, no one can tell. The detective closes his eyes, and for the first time, he doesn't see the alley. Afterward, the cameras gather again. Reporters ask about closure, about relief, about forgiveness. The mother answers none of it. She simply says, now she can rest, and so can this city. The cameras catch that sentence, and for once, they don't edit it down. That night, rain returns, soft and familiar. The city breathes differently now, lighter but not free. The porch light burns one last time, steady, unshaken, before the mother finally turns it off. The detective drives home through streets washed clean and empty. At a red light, he glances in the rearview mirror and half expects to see her walking there. The young woman from 1991, umbrella in hand, eyes on the street ahead, unafraid. But the mirror shows only rain. He nods once to no one and drives on. In a room where evidence once lay under cold lamps, the objects are packed away. Bags sealed, labels faded, stored in drawers marked closed. But some nights, when the building creaks and the city's wind crawls through vents, you can almost hear the whisper of her name. Quiet, certain, at peace. Glasgow sleeps. The alley finally exhales, and the rain, that faithful witness, falls again. Justice has a sound in this city. It isn't the gavel or the cheer outside court. It's quieter, a recalibration of how doors close, how footsteps decide their pace, how the river accepts the day without bargaining. After the verdict, Glasgow does not roar. It inhales like a boxer after the bell and sits on its stool, counting heartbeats, tasting copper and rain. The papers lift the headline to the sky, fold it into a plane, throw it, watch it circle once, then glide into the Kelvin. Cold case solved, the words float. The current keeps moving anyway. Because solved is not the same as mended. Solved is a bridge that holds. Mended is a wound that stops telling time. The detective wakes the next morning to a room that knows his shape too well. The case file isn't on the chair. His hand reaches for it anyway. Habit built a staircase in his body, and he climbs it without thinking. He stands at the window with a mug, and finally tastes the tea. It is almost sweet. Down on the street, a bin lorry complains to the day. A cyclist glides in a line of pale steam. A boy kicks a ball that skids. A shop opens its shutter with a sound like an old throat clearing. Ordinary life, the kind he swore not to take for granted and then did, because humans are not built for constant reverence. His phone buzzes. A message from the liaison officer. Family okay. Press won't leave. We're handling. Another from forensics. Boxed everything. Kept the earring twins together. He replies with a word that looks like thanks and feels like a benediction. He dresses without the weight of a shoulder-holstered ghost. He still checks the lock twice. At the Lemon Kitchen, the mother has learned a new choreography. How to move through a house when a long vigil has ended. She keeps reaching for the porch light switch, the way a widow touches the cold side of a bed. Old habits leave fingerprints on your muscles. She sets the blue folder on top of the red and the green, primary colors of a life that refused to bow. She makes tea in the quiet and forgets the bag and the cup. It grows strong. She lets it. People come in a procession of casseroles and questions. She accepts the casseroles, declines the questions. The questions aren't cruel, just curious, just the city asking what language grief speaks when it changes from future tense to past. She says the same sentence like a liturgy. She's at peace. After a while, the house understands and repeats it back to her in the small ways that houses show love. A window that no longer sticks. A floorboard that finally decides not to complain at 3 a.m. A kettle that hums like a cat. The cafe opens as usual and not at all as usual. The chalkboard refuses theater. It lists soup. The poster comes down carefully with a gentleness reserved for paper that has learned to be a face. The manager slides it into a sleeve and tucks it behind the till. Customers arrive and pretend not to stare at the empty space on the glass. Some leave flowers without asking where flowers should go when the city's shrine is a place that sells scones. The barista makes coffee with hands that don't shake this morning. She adds an extra sugar to a regular's cup without charging him, not because he deserves it, but because kindness needs calories to survive. On the radio, the announcer reads the news in a voice that thinks neutrality is a religion. Someone at the back says, "About time." The room doesn't agree out loud, but it breathes an unpunctuated sentence together. In the prison van, the man who once chose night over name stares at a life that won't obey him. The route to Barlini scribbles through streets he knows like old jokes. He watches the city through mesh and glass and recognizes the corner where he fixed a headlamp under summer that felt like a fever. The bridge where wind used to delete small mistakes. The pub that traded confessions for lager and then denied responsibility like a teenager. He thinks of the stag without antlers. He thinks of a key that no longer fits any door. He tries not to think of her. He fails. Memory is a volunteer with good attendance. It shows up even when you strike it from the rota. He wonders if he will learn the names of the birds that land on the wire outside his new window. He decides not to. He decides many things he won't keep. Appeals promise themselves like sails on a window you never plan to enter. His solicitor writes letters with sentences that walk heel to toe on the edge of doubt. Chain of custody, partials, prejudice, nobody, reasonable this, reasonable that. The courts receive them with the patience of granite. The detective reads the filings and feels neither anger nor triumph. He feels time. the way it flexes, the way it sometimes gives a little and sometimes cracks your knuckles for trying. He files a response where it's his to file, signs his name in a hand that has become simpler over the years. Flourishes are for weddings. Justice needs block print and a date. On Saatchi Hall, the alley wears its repainting like foundation on an old scar. People cut through it with new confidence that is also a test. We walk here because we can now. A street artist paints a small stag in a corner. Not large, not obvious. Antlers restored, head lifted as if scenting weather. Nobody claims it. The city develops a habit of leaving it alone, as if touching it would undo a thread the universe has only just tied. A woman photographs it at dusk and posts it with the caption we remember. The detective sees it late, on a night he forgets to silence his phone, and sits up in bed, the light from the screen turning his hands the color of cold milk. He saves the photo and doesn't know why. The next day he walks the alley at lunch with a sandwich he doesn't eat. The stag watches him not as a suspect or a savior, but as a witness. He nods to Paint. Paint nods back by staying. We must speak about the friend, the one in the doorway, all those years ago, the man who learned the geometry of regret. He doesn't become a symbol. He becomes a person who remembers to pay his council tax on time and sometimes forgets how to sleep. He writes a letter to the mother, long, careful, unpostable. He apologizes to the air and to the window and to the past that refuses to stay behind him. He folds the letter and places it in a drawer and believes for a few hours that paper can contain electricity. Then he takes it out and tears it into strips and throws it away in bins scattered across 3 postcodes because superstition is simply the admin of guilt. He will never tell anyone that some nights, in the indifferent heat of a too late summer, he walks the old route and whispers a weather report to a girl who doesn't need it anymore. A charity shop in the West End receives a box that smells of attic. Inside, on top of jigsaw puzzles with missing pieces and cardigans with precise memories of shoulders, there's a cap without a brim and a jacket that once tried to read Mac but forgot its vowels. The volunteer sorts by instinct and price. She sets the jacket aside. Something in its fabric feels like a story she won't sell. She doesn't know why she knows. She just does. She bags it for textile recycling, writes a note on the bag's label. Do not put on rail, a small act of curation in a city that has had enough of certain ghosts being worn for fashion. The lab doesn't close the freezer with a flourish. It shuts with a click and a log entry. But the evidence officer lingers. He straightens the rows like books in a library. He thinks about heat and cold, about how much of his job is weather control for things that have experienced cruel climates. He has a habit of speaking to the shelves when he's alone, of thanking objects that cannot hear without instruments. When the earring twins go into their drawer, he tucks a strip of acid-free paper behind the label, a small margin where no margin is needed. He tells no one because kindness is better when it's weightless. Reporters try to turn this into a cautionary tale with punctuation that sells. The city resists, not out of cynicism, but out of accuracy. It remembers the work, the Tuesdays, the tea, the handfuls of soil, the dogs apologized to, the ledger nobody binned because indifference was out sick that day. It remembers the mother's porch light, that unambiguous signal to the universe. Here, here, here. For a month after the verdict, a neighborhood overuses lamps, windows glow late, tenements look like patient ships. Then, gradually, lights retire to their reasonable hours. Night resumes its job as a blanket, not a threat. There are ceremonies, not the loud kind, flowers at the river where the bridge keeps its own counsel, a small plaque at the cafe that doesn't say in memoriam because the manager hates Latin and what it does to feelings. It says, her laugh lived here. People touch it with fingertips, the way you test the temperature of water before stepping in. The mother visits late when the table stack in the dishwasher hums like a warm animal. She stands at the chalkboard and writes nothing. The manager offers her the chalk anyway. She draws a tiny umbrella in the corner and leaves. The next morning, nobody erases it. Because it would be dishonest to pretend the city doesn't do maths. How many years? How many officers? How many hours? How many headlines? The superintendent answers questions in a committee room that pretends sound travels well in it. She explains budgets and breakthroughs and why you keep a smear cold even when columns demand the money be warm elsewhere. She speaks about familial searches with care and history with teeth. Someone asks about luck. She says, we make room for it. Someone asks if this changes anything. She says, it changes today. Outside, the rain offers emphasis without asking permission. The detective takes a holiday he didn't plan. He goes to a coastal town where wind exfoliates the mind. He doesn't bring the file because the file has learned to live without him. He brings a book and reads the same page twice, then a third time, then not at all. On the second night, he dreams of the alley for the first time since the verdict, but the door opens the right way, and the hinge doesn't complain, and the lane leads to a street full of lamplight where nobody hurries, because nobody has to. He wakes with his hands unclenched. He sits on a bench that overestimates its view and watches a dog decide which wave to bark at. He realizes he has no notes to take on this. He decides to be bad at relaxing honestly. In prison, seasons arrive as rumors first. An officer mentions Frost in a tone that suggests the world still functions. Thank you very much. Later, a bird stays an extra 5 seconds on the wire. Later still, the heating complains with a whistle that implies October. The man learns time in new units, head counts, trays, the number of steps in a yard that thinks it's a square mile. A chaplain visits. He doesn't confess, not in the way television expects. He talks around edges. The chaplain is a patient teacher of ellipses. He asks, "Do you say her name?" The man says nothing. He says everything by holding the silence as if it might bolt. The chaplain leaves him a psalm copied on scrap paper. He doesn't read it. Weeks later, he knows a line by heart and cannot explain how it got there. An appeal hearing arrives like a stubborn winter sunrise, late and underwhelming. The defense argues old arguments in new suits. The judges listen with faces that make marble look performative. The familial partial holds. The thread holds. The car park times hold. The earring twin holds everything together like a stitch no one noticed. The appeal fails. The word appears in a paragraph that will end up as a footnote in a textbook, and also in a sigh that travels the length of a kitchen and softens a woman's shoulders by a centimeter. The city reshapes its ghost story. It stops using the alley as a punchline to scare teenagers into taxis. It starts telling a different story of a mother who kept a porch light on and a team that didn't confuse waiting with surrender. The stag in paint becomes a marker on late-night walks, the way joggers tap certain poles for luck. A busker writes a song that doesn't name anyone, and everyone knows what it's about. He plays it near the bridge and counts coins he doesn't keep. He hands them to a shelter, because profit feels wrong in this key. The detective returns to work. There are other files. The incident room has new maps, new names that bristle at string. He carries into each one the lesson that time is not a wall, it's a corridor. You don't smash through, you walk, you keep walking till a door unlocks itself out of respect. He visits the lemon kitchen once more without the entourage of microphones. He brings flowers that are wrong for the season and is forgiven. They sit without agenda. They talk about nothing, which is a luxury earned. The mother asks about the stag on the wall. He says he's seen it. She smiles the kind of smile that keeps cities going. Good, she says. It can stay. And beneath all of it, the new calm, the old scar, the careful plaques, and the paint that refuses to flake, there is the low note we recognized at the start. It isn't dread anymore. It's persistence, the frequency of a city remembering how to be itself after a long lesson. The Kelvin keeps the secret it was asked to keep and gives back a different one, a surface that accepts sky without arguing. The bridges hold, the buses run. Pub doors still cough out smoke and gossip and the sound of people choosing each other for a night, for a decade, for a lifetime. The alley is just a way from here to there most hours, except when it isn't, when someone pauses and looks down at the painted stag and feels the prickle of a story that lived here and ended and left a useful map in its place. Night then, a gentler one, rain that doesn't insist, a second-floor window where light doesn't burn as a prayer but glows because someone forgot and then remembered and smiled and left it on anyway. A phone that rings and is answered on the first tone, a door that locks properly, keys that find their bowl. The detective in bed, listening to a city that has stopped whispering why and started saying, still. The mother asleep without the porch light arguing with the dawn. The cafe's chalkboard wiped clean to make space for tomorrow's handwriting. The stag on the wall catching just enough streetlight to prove it exists. Glasgow, not forgiven, not forgetting, simply itself in the rain, breathing in, breathing out, unafraid of the sound. Grief doesn't leave, it learns manners. It stops interrupting every sentence and starts waiting in doorways, polite, persistent, a guest with no departure time. Months turn deliberate, then casual. The city tries on a new rhythm like a jacket that needs breaking in. On the bridge, a busker retires the song he wrote and learns a quieter one with a refrain you can only hear if you lean in. In the lemon kitchen, the blue folder sits atop the red and green as if color theory could explain endurance. Some mornings the mother opens it and reads the first clipped article as if it belongs to someone else, some other city where rain fell with the same accent. Other mornings she waters a plant and forgets to check the soil with her finger first, and the world holds without instruction. The detective returns to an incident room that doesn't know how to miss anyone. It just rearranges chairs. New photographs absorb thumbprints, new maps insist they are unprecedented, new names make their case for mattering. He walks past the wall where the old board was and finds himself reaching. Air remembers where string used to be. He takes a younger constable to the alley, not as pilgrimage, but as training. Look, he says, and even he doesn't know whether he means the angle of the light, the pitch of the gutter, the way a bad lock once mouthed open like a mistake rehearsed into habit. The constable nods with the respect of a student who understands that the lesson is not the alley, not even the case, but the posture, forward, alert, patient, without being passive. They stand in silence long enough for a pigeon to reconsider its route. We don't chase ghosts, the detective adds. We make room for them to tell the truth. It sounds sentimental. It is not. It is a procedure disguised as a prayer. In a charity office above a bakery that ships warmth through the stairwell, a woman builds a page titled, in black letters that wear their solemnity lightly, "The light stays on." A fund, small at first, then not so small. Not for statues or plaques or headlines that pretend they discovered persistence. For things that bend the day toward safety in boring ways. Bus stop lighting where the bulbs die too often. Grants for late-night escorts that don't wear fluorescent vests but know every corner. Trainings that teach bar staff to name wrongness without theatrics. The city proves once again it is good at paying for what it decides to love. There is a launch nobody calls a launch. A kettle. A plate of biscuits that will not survive 20 minutes. A counselor whose speech is mercifully short. The mother speaks a sentence that lands with a firmness you can build on. If you change one small thing on one bad corner, you change the map. The mural stag breeds a cousin. No antlers this time. Just a head bowed to water painted under a moody arch along the Kelvin, monochrome except for a single thread of silver that catches dusk. A runner taps it each morning as if greeting a colleague. A night shift nurse who hates superstition, invents a superstition for this, touches 2 fingers to the eye when she crosses the bridge after a long stretch of rooms that asked too much. Someone photographs the new stag and sends it to the detective with no caption. He doesn't need one. He saves it next to the first, a private diptych of vows kept. Inside Barlini, days are folded into squares the size of a cell window. He learns the schedule like a telegram. Short, clipped, insistent. He exchanges one silence for another. The chaplain returns because consistency is a theology all its own. They trade sentences that jump tracks, meet again, shrug. One day the chaplain brings a newspaper clipping, not as taunt or sermon, but as chronology. An article about other cold cases, edged warmer by technology and tenacity. The man reads without moving his eyes much, a habit that once hid him in pubs. He doesn't care about the numbers. He stumbles on a line about a body found after 28 years because a river changed its mind about what it wanted to keep. That night the cell is noisy with a tap somewhere far down the corridor, a metal ache that syncs with a memory he has barred entry to. He sleeps anyway, or says he does. No one checks inside the head. Saatchi Hall keeps its swagger. New shops arrive with fonts that try too hard. Old places hold on like tenacious teeth. The alley is a shortcut again, which is the most respectful outcome for a place that was forced into mythology. Students cut through laughing at jokes that won't travel and don't need to. A man pauses and looks at the shadow line where the bad lock used to hang wrong. He feels the muscle tug of an old story, recognizes it, nods to it, and continues. This is what recovery looks like when it refuses parades, the ordinary given back its full width. There is a strange economy to attention. When the case was unsolved, it drew people like weather warnings. Solved, it gives back in smaller denominations. A true crime podcast requests an interview, and the family says no with a politeness that decapitates entitlement. A producer writes back with a respectfully that isn't. The detective reads the email because courtesy is part of discipline and deletes it because discipline sometimes needs mercy. He says yes to a school assembly instead, stands beneath a banner that oversells achievement and talks about the kind of patience that does not brand. He describes chain of custody like a love story between evidence and honesty. He watches 20 faces land on a single idea, that grown-ups can keep promises so long it looks like obsession from the outside. The lab keeps working. Science does not turn sentimental when a file closes. A technician, young, precise, quietly evangelical about controls, finds a way to coax more song from quieter samples. A side project, a tweak to a protocol, a new soft brush for old wounds. She runs the Earring twins again, not because they'll change, but because iteration is fidelity. The numbers hum the same tune. She smiles anyway. Repetition, when it proves the thing you need it to prove, feels like grace. She writes a brief note to the detective, careful to avoid the arrogance of discovery when the discovery is really confirmation. He writes back, "Thank you for looking after them." He means the earrings. He means the city. Weather breaks the year into understandable pieces. Spring notices the stag murals without knowing their parents. Summer leans against railings over the Kelvin with a can and pretends this is a postcard. Autumn works like a careful editor. Winter arrives early and doesn't apologize. On the anniversary, the calendar insists even if nobody else does. The cafe opens an hour late without notice. The manager sits by the chalkboard and fails to write anything with gravity. He settles for a small heart tucked in the corner where the umbrella used to be. A stranger buys coffee for the person behind her and says nothing, which is the correct length for a sermon in a city that mistrusts speeches. The mother doesn't mark the day publicly. She walks a route that is not the route and watches dogs misread the river on purpose, a game species invented to teach people what joy looks like after litigation. The friend, doorway, geometry, regret, changes his flat, moves 3 streets over, a distance large enough to feel like a decision, small enough to keep his routines on leashes that fit. He keeps 1 key on a ring with no ornament, as if any charm would be an insult to progress. He becomes useful in the way quiet men can be, watches for the kid who lingers outside the takeaway at closing, asks the right question when a woman stands uncertain at a taxi rank, learns the names of night staff by saying thank you without looking at his feet. Some nights he passes the mural stag and says her name under his breath. He does not apologize anymore. He just speaks. The inspector retires because you cannot argue a calendar into mercy forever. The party is the size he prescribed, small. Someone brings a cake shaped like a file. Someone else hides a bottle that would lose its job if found. Speeches tilt toward punchlines because if you inventory the ache, you lose the room. The detective says what needs to be said, that the job is to keep the bridge open between the unimaginably bad day and the day the hinge finally works, that you don't get to choose which case will teach you what. The inspector nods toward the wall where the map with the veins once lived. It isn't the string, he says. It's the stubbornness. They toast with paper cups that won't know their place in history. In a basement at headquarters that smells like dust managing itself well, a new archivist opens boxes with the devout curiosity of a watchmaker. He adjusts gloves, reads labels, straightens misfiled hopes. He lifts the bagged stag keychain with the tenderness of someone who has never treated plastic as cheap. He documents a small crack in the ring with more care than most people reserve for promotions. He calls down the detective because certain things shouldn't be handled by a stranger's eyes alone. Together they look, not at evidence now, not at leverage, just at time that decided to harden into an object. Strange, isn't it, the archivist says, how the story lives outside the thing. The detective nods. And how the thing keeps us honest about the story. There is no epilogue because epilogues pretend the book knows the meaning of its own ending. But there are afters, and they are worth naming. A girl in a neon jacket takes a safer route home because a streetlight works. A boy who grew up near the alley becomes a scientist and tells a machine to listen harder. A constable in her first week learns to leave space in interviews for quiet to do its work. The chaplain writes one more line on a scrap for a man who won't read it and leaves it anyway, as if paper can hum where mouths cannot. A mural stag loses an ear to graffiti and regains it in a day, painted back by a hand that matched the gray without mixing. The river keeps its counsel, the bridge keeps its promise, the city keeps its habit of being difficult and generous in the same breath. One night, it could be any night, the detective walks alone down Saatchi Hall after a late briefing that unknots nothing and still feels necessary. Rain finds him without malice. The alley waits, no longer a test. He steps in. The light is good, the kind that flatters brick. The air smells of wet stone, and the second act of a show he'll never see. At the far end, the small painted stag regards him with that indifference paint owes the living. He thinks of the first phone call, 2 tones, then hush, then a third. He thinks of the earring in a bag like a moon. He thinks of the lemon kitchen and the way a porch light can be language. He thinks of a city that learned to trade fear for vigilance without becoming hard. He doesn't narrate any of it. He just walks, an ordinary man crossing an ordinary gap that, for a long season, held too much meaning. Halfway through he stops, not for a flourish, not for ghosts, for breath. He listens, not to sirens, to the softer thing beneath them. A bin lorry in the distance, a laugh from a pub door rehearsing a story for the 4th time. The record sleeve scrape of tires on wet stone, the small, decisive click of a lock that works. He moves on. At the mouth of the alley, beneath a sky that cannot help its weather, he turns left toward home. The city, relieved of an old question, makes room for new ones. The stag keeps watch without asking for thanks. And rain, competent and endless, writes Glasgow's name again on every surface until morning reads it and nods.